Before we officially open the meeting, I will read the usual statement about compliance. In compliance with the state and county shelter-at-home orders and as allowed by the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, which allows for a deviation of teleconference rules required by the Ralph M. Brown Act, City Council meetings will be held by teleconference only until further notice. Rather than attending in person, residents should call 805-865-7276 to provide public comment via phone. The phone line will open just prior to the start of the closed session meeting and again prior to the start of the regular meeting. Written public comments can be submitted via email to cityclerk@prcity.com prior to 12 noon on the day of the council meeting to be posted as an addendum to the agenda. If submitting written comments in advance of the meeting, please note the agenda item by number or name. City Council meetings will be live streamed during the meeting and also available to play later on YouTube by accessing the following link, www.prcity.com/YouTube. And with that, I will call the meeting to order for the Paso Robles City Council for Tuesday, August the 18th. And I will invite all but Councilwoman Garcia to mute their microphones. And Councilwoman, if you would please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, sir. Everyone, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. For tonight's invocation, we have Pastor Pat Sheehan. Pat, are you with us?
Dear Heavenly Father, you who dwell in heaven, holy is your name. May your blessings rest mightily upon Paso Robles. May the riches of your grace be enjoyed by all who know you. And Lord, kindly continue to grant our leaders wisdom and understanding to lead our fair city through these turbulent times. Father, we are grateful to you for your conspicuous blessings upon Paso Robles. Lord, watch over those who care for us on a daily basis. Bless our police and emergency services. Bless our healthcare providers, and bless those especially who are fighting this fire to our north. Thank you, Father, for our mayor, for our city council members, and bless them and their families through this season. Comfort those who have mourned lost loved ones, missed funerals, delayed weddings, and those whose lives and incomes have been on hold these many days. Be gracious to us and have mercy on us as we trust in you. Lord, in your precious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for that. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Gregory.
Here.
Councilmember Hammond.
Here.
Councilmember Strong.
Here.
Mayor Martin.
Present. Could we please have staff and commissioner introductions so people who are listening to our meeting tonight know who is attending?
Warren Frace, Community Development Director. With me tonight is Lori Wilson, Assistant Planner. Katie Bannister, Assistant Planner.
Dick McKinley, Public Works.
Julie Dolan, Community Services Director, joined by Cindy Patty, Recreation Staff Assistant.
Mike Compton, City Treasurer.
Ty Lewis, Police Chief.
Jonathan Stornett, Fire Chief.
Ryan Cornell, Administrative Services.
Kimberly Hood, Interim City Attorney, and with me is City Attorney Emeritus, Iris Yang.
Tom Frucci, City Manager, and with me this evening is Shauna Hounstein, Community Engagement Coordinator, and Melissa Martin, Deputy City Clerk. And if we have any commissioners who are in attendance, if they would like to introduce themselves at this point, as requested by the mayor. And Mr. Mayor, Dennis Fanther, our city clerk, is also in attendance this evening. He will be receiving a proclamation later. He may want to introduce himself as well.
Dennis?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good evening. Dennis, city clerk for the last time.
Very good. Welcome. Prior to this open, we had a a closed session meeting of the Paso Robles City Council prior to this open session, and I'll ask the city attorney if there was any reportable action from that.
Thank you, Mayor. The council convened in closed session for conferences legal counsel on one existing litigation matter, conferences real property negotiators regarding 2 properties identified on the agenda, and a conference with labor negotiators, but there's no reportable action.
Thank you. We move on to presentations. I do want to get this presentation in as the first item tonight from Mr. Fansler. Just sort of a heads up here, as most people in the community are aware, we've had some announcements from PG&E that there may be power outages tonight. Right now, we feel that the chance of that is waning, but is still a potential reality. So later on, we will probably rearrange the order in which things are being presented so we can make sure that we get to time-critical issues this evening in the event there is a power outage. And we will discuss other eventualities in that case also. So let's move on now to presentations. We have a retirement proclamation for Dennis Fansler. So Dennis, you're still listening in there, I trust?
Yes.
Okay. Dennis Fansler's retirement, serving the city of Paso Robles for more than 37 years, whereas Dennis's career with the city of Paso Robles began in 1983, and whereas Dennis has served the city of Paso Robles for more than 37 years, whereas Dennis served in his role diligently and oversaw multiple projects, including maintenance of city parks and sports fields, whereas Dennis was instrumental in setting up the lighting and landscaping and drainage districts for the city, whereas Dennis has always been known by his colleagues to be kind, friendly, and quick-witted, and whereas in 1999 Dennis was appointed as the city clerk, whereas Dennis retired from his full-time maintenance services superintendent position in 2013 and continued to serve the city in his role as city clerk, and whereas Dennis has served as the city clerk for the city of Paso Robles from June of 1999 until August of 2020. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Stephen W. Martin, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor and speaking on behalf of the entire city council, do hereby extend our gratitude to Dennis Fansler on the special occasion of his retirement from city clerk and for his 37 years of dedicated service to the city of Paso Robles. Thank you and congratulations, Dennis. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, please. I'm on the air.
You are.
Well, good evening, Mayor Martin and council members. Thank you so much for the kind words and the recognition. I truly appreciate it. I'd like to take just a minute to talk about our city. I've been fortunate to have worked for 3 different departments in my time with the city and also in an elected position. So I think I have a well-rounded view of the city, and I have to say I love our city. First, I'd like to talk about council a little bit. When I first started attending council meetings years ago, I learned very quickly that to be a council member, you can't be faint of heart. You have to do a lot of work. It's a difficult job, and you have to have a thick skin. So I appreciate the men and women through the years who have given of their time and stepped forward to lead the city. So I appreciate that. Second, I want to give a thank you to all the city staff who I served with for so many years. Many of those staff persons became mentors and friends, and I appreciate all of them. Lastly, I want to thank our Deputy City Clerk, Melissa Martin. She's a hardworking, smart, and capable young woman who's done a terrific job during these very difficult times, and I'm very thankful for that, Melissa. Thank you. So with that, I'll have to say so long and all the best to our city leaders and staff as they guide us towards a bright future. Hopefully I'll see you sometime at a council meeting, and until then, so long. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Have a happy retirement. So as we move forward here, we have several other presentations, but with the council's permission, I would like to mix things up a little bit here. I'd like to go directly to general public comments, and then after that to our consent agenda, and then come back to the presentations. Is there any problem with that, Kimberly?
No, there's no problem with that.
Should we have a formal motion to change the agenda?
No, you don't need a motion.
Very good. So let's move on now to general public comments. This is a time the public may address the council on items within the council's purview, but not scheduled on the agenda tonight. Please begin by stating your name and address. Each person is limited to 3 minutes. Any person or subject requiring more than 3 minutes may be scheduled for a future council meeting or referred to committee or staff. Those persons wishing to speak on any item scheduled on the agenda will be given an opportunity to do so at the time that item is being considered. So at this time, we'll open the phone lines for general public comments. I understand we have one person online right now.
Yes, sir. Yesenia Echeverria.
Welcome.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Yesenia Echeverria, and Mayor Martin, you wanted my address as well?
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, 812 Sycamore Canyon Road, Paso Robles, California. My name is Yesenia Echeverria. I am founder of Mujeres de Éxito, Women of Success. We are a grassroots organization that has been around in this community serving North County families, specifically Paso Robles, for 6 years now. Our focus is serving Latinx families. So we work with a lot of working class, a lot of Hispanic folks that do the day-to-day labor work. And there's also a large indigenous community. So we do also a lot of reaching out in their indigenous language. My call for today is on COVID. I don't know if you guys have seen that Tribune article that was published today that nearly 50% of cases are found to be Hispanic or Latino. As someone who serves the Hispanic community, I am very, very concerned of these numbers. Mujeres de Éxito, we have been first responders from the very beginning, starting a Facebook group, translating information, serving, giving food, helping people diagnosed with COVID and such. And so my concern is, as someone who loves our town, and I see the local economy is so important to so many families that own businesses in the downtown, I know that is a very sensitive subject for us to be more strict when it comes to our local economy, but I am seeing that there are a lot of families that have seemed to be taking COVID very lightly. I've been seeing parties and such, and so I would like to have an action plan now moving forward. I am concerned. I don't know what's going on in Paso from the very beginning. We have been a hotspot. We're still leading, and that's not anything to be proud of. And so I'm calling today in regards to voice my concern, speak on behalf of the Hispanic community, one in which we have a lot of working class members, and I'm concerned that we don't have enough testing happening locally here, specifically for Paso, since we're leading the way, and figuring out an action plan moving forward. And Mujeres de Éxito would like to play a role in that. And since we have been able to establish trust with families here in Paso Robles, and we know the dynamic that we are serving. So I hope this serves to you guys and that we can move forward with an action plan.
Very good. I thank you for that, and would like you to know that I'll be speaking later this evening about conversations I've had with people in the public about enlisting citizen support and assistance with addressing the very points that you're talking about for the general population. So if you'd like to be involved in that, I'd love to hear from you. So do we have anyone else in the queue for public comment?
No, sir.
Very good. So let's move now to our consent calendar, because we have a couple of time-sensitive issues here that really need to be acted upon tonight. And if we do happen to have a power outage, we don't want to be cut off in mid-discussion. Items on the consent calendar are considered routine, not requiring separate discussion. However, if discussion is wanted by a member of the council or public, that item may be removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. Council members and members of the public may offer comments or ask questions of clarification without removing an item from the calendar. Individual items are approved by the vote that approves the consent calendar unless an item is pulled for separate consideration. Items pulled from the consent will be heard at the end of the meeting. So let me go with our council members tonight. And for those of you who have not tuned in recently, we try to go in alphabetical order so all the council members get an equal time to make comments. And also we rotate the starting council members so everyone has a chance to start off at one time or another. So we'll start with the council for comments, questions, or if you want to have an item pulled. Mr. Strong?
No questions and no comments at this point.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
None from me, sir.
Thank you. Councilman Gregory?
Yes, Mr. Martin, I just had a question on item 9.
Mm-hmm.
Is this just for the design of the bridge only?
Yes, sir. This is still design work.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Very good. Councilman Hammond?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Maybe, I'm not sure, Ryan Cornell might answer. calculations here on the approval of the general obligation tax bond rate being changed, actually lowered, is my math, it looks like it's about 15% to the public. Is that what we're showing? Coming from 0.424 down to 0.363?
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Actually, our city treasurer, Mike Compton's on the line, and I think he would be best to answer that question.
Okay.
Councilman Hammond, you are correct. The tax rate has dropped about 15% due to two things. One is the increase in assessed value, and secondly, the use of $300,000 in bond reserves.
That is good. That it sounds like we're definitely being very fiduciary with our monies for the city. Obviously, we're trying to keep the tax rate down as low as possible. I think the public should know that. So that's all I had particularly. I thought that was about the percentage that I saw. Thank you.
Very good. I have no questions. Do we have anybody from the community who has a brief question or wants to have an item withdrawn?
We have no one on the line for comment on these.
In that case, I'll bring it back to the council and entertain a motion to approve a consent calendar.
I'd like to make the motion. There's a motion for Councilman Gregory to approve the consent agenda as stated.
Councilman Strong, seconds.
Motion by Councilman Gregory, second by Councilman Strong. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Gregory?
Yes.
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Councilmember Garcia?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Aye.
Mayor Martin?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Mr. Frucci, for the benefit of our listening audience, would you like to give us a short report on what actions we've taken, please?
Yes, sir. Be glad to. So tonight on the consent calendar, the council approved the minutes from the city council meeting of August 4th. That also received the warrant register, and the warrant register is the list of the checks the city writes for the goods and services that it purchases. The warrant register for this 2-week period totaled $713,000, of which about $265,000 was related to the two major utilities, the water utility and the wastewater utility. In addition, there was a bill that cuts across all departments and funds for $126,000 for PG&E. The council also approved an agreement with Water Systems Consulting to complete a water master plan update and to meet the requirements of the America's Water Infrastructure Act of 2018. And the water master plan update will give us an update of the capital projects necessary to keep the water system in tip-top shape. And the Water Infrastructure Act requirement is a new requirement, and it requires us to do a risk assessment on our water system and to develop an emergency response plan if there are any risks that are perceived to be significant. In addition, the council approved a security contract for Borky Flats, and that is the firm that is providing nighttime security and weekend security for the homeless encampment on North River Road. The council approved an amendment to the agreement with AECOM for the design of the 24th Street Bridge, and that has known to be some additional work necessary for quite a while, and it's basically analyzing the right-of-way issues between the city and Union Pacific Railroad, and the railroad is cooperating in that effort. The council also approved the investment policy and portfolio, and the city treasurer under council policy brings the investment policy to the council every year for review and acceptance. And this year, the city treasurer, Mike Compton, and this is his last opportunity as he is retiring in December. He did bring some updates and some refinements, nothing significant in terms of overall investment guidelines. And he also brought the monthly treasurer's report for the month ending June 30th, 2020. And in order to update that process, we will be bringing the treasurer's report to the council quarterly from now on. And there is no requirement in the policy that it be brought to the council monthly. Obviously, we forward it to the council, but this way quarterly it will be brought to the council in public session in case there's any public comment on it. And then finally, as already been discussed, the council approved a reduction in the general obligation bond tax rate. And this, I believe, is double-digit years that Mr. Compton has brought this to the council, and the council has approved a reduction in the tax rate. So as Councilmember Hammond said, it is something very worthy of note of the public that the treasurer and council seek to reduce the tax bill for all properties within the city. And that, Your Honor, is the sum total of the items approved on consent this evening.
Very good, thank you. Before we return to the regular agenda already in progress, let's talk a little bit about what happens if we do lose power tonight. If we lose power in the middle of the meeting, will we be restarting this meeting on a fixed date, on a certain date?
That is subject to the council's decisions. You, for example, could decide to continue this meeting till, for example, tomorrow night at 6:30. That is totally up to you how you choose to handle it.
Okay, and this is only if we're interrupted tonight. So let's go in order. Is 6:30 tomorrow night okay for a continuation time, Councilman Strong?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
Yes, sir.
Councilman Gregory?
Yes, sir.
And Councilman Hammond?
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that's good with me. I don't think we need any official action, but just to notify that if we lose power tonight, we will resume business tomorrow night, same time, same station, 6:30 p.m.
Great. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back now to presentations. Item number 2 on our agenda is Pavement to Parks rideshare presentation.
Yes, that would be me. Good evening, Mayor Martin, council members, and Paso Robles. My name is Peter, and I'm joined also by my colleague Catalina. The San Luis Obispo Council of Government is our region's agency responsible for transportation planning and funding, and the rideshare division is the one-stop shop for transportation information, which also includes working from home right now. So like the city council presentation, our fall campaign looks a little different this year. We do have a PowerPoint. I don't know if everybody can see that. Melissa can put it on the screen.
We're working on bringing that up right now, Peter.
I'm way ahead of it. Well, I'll throw in our work from home stuff with a lot of our employers in the region. Before the pandemic, we're about 7% of people working from home. And now it's up to, obviously, 65% plus based on our survey results. So a lot less cars on the road for now still, and it's somewhat holding. So we are doing a fall campaign that looks at land use in a little bit of a different way. Falls right in with the times. You've probably seen some changes happening in downtown Paso. If you've been to Cambria or SLO, you've seen that there as well. And were you able to pull up that presentation, Melissa?
Yes, the presentation is live on our YouTube feed. You may not be able to see it in your team screen.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to turn this over to Kat.
Alrighty, so my name is Catalina. I work with Peter at SLOCOG. This year, we created a campaign called Pavement to Parks. Can you guys all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So it's basically to celebrate the transformation of underutilized public space, also known as parking spots. One of the very small silver linings of the pandemic is that we now have pocket parklets popping up all throughout the county, including Paso Robles. If you want to go to the next slide. While most businesses are expanding into nearby parking spaces out of necessity, we're seeing a number of voluntary pocket parks pop up, and those are allowing for safe business, socializing, dining, and much more. We're currently recruiting existing and new parklets that exist in Paso Robles to participate in this campaign. And the first one we have confirmed is actually Taste. So really exciting. We also have a number of locations in SLO, Cambria, and Arroyo Grande. You can check out the growing list of locations at rideshare.org/park there at the bottom of the screen. And I'll give it to Peter.
Awesome. All right, so what we have on here is the QR code. Participation super easy, anytime from September 1st through October 9th. You can stop by your favorite location and scan the QR code sign using your iPhone camera or other QR app. This is actually a legit QR code, so if you want to give that a try, you're more than welcome. You can give us your early feedback. And each time you scan these, you'll be able to rate the parklet you're at and enter to win $100 gift cards. And we can skip over to the next one. Some of the fancier parklets might make you think of a cafe in Europe, as you kind of saw at the one from Cambria. We'll slide back. We have some pretty cool spaces emerging, and I want to make sure that you get some photos of your experience. And some of these might not be around forever, so definitely get out, check out the community. And we're offering any business that wants to open a parklet $300 sponsorship to improve their space. So that's existing or businesses that want to open a parklet. You don't need to be a restaurant necessarily to do one of these. We have one at our office and actually had my annual review in it. So a lot of use case scenarios. Back to Kat.
Yeah, so if you're on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, you can visit the parklet and use the hashtag #ParksLowCounty for a chance to win additional prizes. We want to see how you use this space to dine, relax, or maybe even, have your annual review. All right, next slide. As Peter mentioned, we have sponsorship money and a lot of marketing opportunities available for participating locations. We also have financial prizes for parklets that get voted the best in the 5 categories you see on the screen there. If you're a business owner or manager and you're interested in creating an outdoor space for your business, feel free to contact us at info@rideshare.org there on the bottom, or you can call 511 and we will pick up the phone. And back to Peter.
Awesome. So big thanks to our sponsors. That includes Travel Paso and the Paso Chamber. You can see a few locations here. We know that Taste is confirmed for Paso, and we have a lot of others who are probably going to jump on board. We haven't made all those calls yet. Still have time before September 1st, which is good. So a few of those locations are on there. The growing list is going to be, again, at rideshare.org/park. And if you want to forward to the final slide, this is just a little PSA. Any families tuning in, and Paso is probably the only jurisdiction with families from my memory of doing these presentations. I also want to mention International Walk to School Day. It'll be on Wednesday, October 7th. We'll be giving away bikes for families that participate in virtual PE programs or pick up lunch by walking or biking to their nearby school location. So things are obviously pretty different, but we still want to promote active transportation and push out some of that knowledge to the families during this time. So thank you to the City Council for allowing us to present our fall campaign. And if you have any questions, we are happy to answer.
Thank you. Questions from Council, Mr. Strong?
No questions. Wonderful presentation. We've been doing a lot on this at the SLCOG, and I'm glad to see our staff working this so hard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gregory?
No questions. Thank you.
And Councilman Hammond?
No questions for Peter and Catalina. Thank you for the presentation.
Very good. Thank you. I have no questions. Do we have anyone in queue from the community who has a question or a comment?
No, sir.
Very good. Thank you again for the presentation. We do appreciate the information. Moving on now, item number 3, Monterey Bay Community Power Presentation. I have Mr. Killigrew down as the presenter.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor Martin. It's great to reconnect with everybody in the wonderful city of Paso Robles. I know it's been a little while since we've been down there, and I'm just grateful to be here to provide you your annual member agency update as we look towards the enrollment of the residents and businesses in Paso Robles in January, this coming January, so it's very soon. So this would be an opportunity for us to get out in front of the community, just kind of reintroduce ourselves, and then just kind of lay out the next steps in terms of the enrollment, where MBCP, or soon to be Central Coast Community Energy, is going to be your primary electricity service provider. So again, I just wanted to reframe and reintroduce us to the community at large, because it's been about a year or so since the last time we've been down to Paso Robles, when the city actually went through a pretty exhaustive and also robust engagement. Having done the Wake Up Paso with the chamber, we also hosted a public meeting in Paso. I know there was a couple presentations at City Council before we brought the resolution and the ordinance. So we just want to acknowledge all the great work that the city led, as well as all the business and community leaders really just asked the tough questions about what it means to join a community choice aggregation program. And again, how does it work? Again, we like to think of it as a partnership to support our shared customers. In this particular case, MBCP will now go out and procure clean and renewable resources on behalf of the customers in Paso Robles. PG&E will then transmit and distribute those electrons into people's homes and businesses, and voila, you get the same service but at competitive prices. So it really is an improved model that allows for customer choice, local control, and also cost savings, and then reinvestment in the community. I wanted to acknowledge the fact that Paso was one of the first cities to really kind of evaluate joining MBCP last year, and that actually led to a pretty significant charge where over the course of 2019, 11 additional jurisdictions joined Monterey Bay Community Power. So in a nutshell, we are a joint powers authority. We are comprised of the 4 counties across the Central Coast, Santa Barbara County, Monterey County, San Benito, and Santa Cruz County, and then 28 cities within those 4 counties, including 6 cities within the county of San Luis Obispo. It's been an amazing ride thus far, and due to all of this expansion and efforts to unify the Central Coast, we did want to let you know that our governance structure has shifted such that we are getting more representation from the South Central Coast. We now have a seat from the county of Santa Barbara, a seat for the city of Santa Maria. The cities of Goleta and Carpinteria now share a seat, as well as Guadalupe and Solvang. And then based on our governance structure, the city of Paso is currently sharing a seat with San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay. We are committed to a public process at Monterey Bay Community Power. Our policy board of elected officials meets 4 times a year to discuss high-level policy issues. Our operations board of city managers and county administrative officers, they meet 10 times a year. And then our community advisory council meets 7 times a year. So all in effect, our boards meet 21 times a year to discuss all the efforts that MBCP is embarking to support its community at large. So again, really hope that more folks can join these public meetings, but certainly staff is available to have conversations in a variety of different platforms. And this was kind of one of the big things I did want to bring forth to the city council tonight, is the fact that we are changing our name. We got a lot of questions last year about how is Monterey Bay going to be serving San Luis Obispo County communities as well as Santa Barbara. We listened to that and actually sought board approval such that in about 3 weeks, we are changing our name formally to Central Coast Community Energy to really kind of acknowledge the fact that we've expanded our service area. And looking across communities of 5 counties, the Central Coast really is that well-known iconic name, and we really wanted to make sure that we spoke to that when we introduce ourselves now as Central Coast Community Energy. So when customers start enrolling in January of 2021, they will see Central Coast Community Energy on all the flyers, on all the outreach, as well as on the bills. So it really is a monumental step forward for us to really kind of acknowledge this great work that all the communities put forth to create this fantastic agency as it stands. You know, I do want to humbly just acknowledge our accomplishments. As Mayor Harmon mentioned, the potential power shutoffs are front and first on many folks' mind, as well as the pandemic. So I really just wanted to speak to the fact that we are committed to kind of reinvesting locally through local contracts. We actually now have 32 full-time employees. A lot of those are coming from within the Central Coast, and just the fact that we have a focus on, you know, really investing in local contracts, whether it's our printer, whether it's video production services, or even working with media buyers, or a wide variety of other resources. So when we do have RFPs that come out, we certainly want to circulate that through our network across the Central Coast and hopefully solicit more local vendors to really support them, especially in this time. Now, in terms of COVID-19, if City Council has not been aware, our board acted unanimously and swiftly to provide immediate relief to all of our current customers. That was in response to COVID-19. So our board actually signed a resolution to reduce all customer electric generation charges by 50% in the month of May and June. That basically summed up to a little over $22 million of financial relief for those 2 months for all customers. As you can see, that came at a really needed time. But as a public agency, we do have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that those funds can come back. So we are calling it a rate deferment, but we are still committing that our rates are lower than PG&E's this year and moving into 2021. And that is being summarized in a 2% savings compared to PG&E rates. But this was really a pretty seismic shift in terms of our efforts to support the greater community and our customer base. And we've really got a lot of great feedback on this type of innovative and creative thinking through this public agency. I did want to highlight some exciting news around our procurement strategy right now. We've actually signed contracts for almost 200 megawatts of battery storage, as well as almost 500 megawatts of existing and new renewable resources. That's going to meet 35% of our annual demand. And we're actually evaluating with our different boards, and we certainly would love to invite anyone from the city of Paso Robles to learn more about that next week. We're actually having a stakeholder meeting on Wednesday. I can circulate that invite, as well as talking to city staff and county staff throughout our service area of what it would mean to transition us to actually a more affordable and competitive procurement strategy that would get us to 100% clean and renewable by 2030 from new resources. So it's a really exciting development that we are stepping forth to make sure that we are on the right side of providing competitive rates, affordable rates, but also really helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state of California through our energy supply. I did also want to highlight that once customers are enrolled in our service in January, they're going to be eligible for our energy programs, and those are focused on electrification and fuel switching. You know, we set aside about 3% of our gross revenue. That was about $5.5 million this year, and we're actually looking to increase that to about $6.5 million. And I did want to highlight two really exciting new programs that we launched this year. One was our school bus electrification program. So we're actually providing no-cost school buses in partnership with our air district in the Monterey Bay region for 6 school districts. We're actually going to increase the funding for that, hopefully as long as the board approves it, to actually provide funding for school districts within the enrolling communities in San Luis Obispo County, as well as Santa Barbara. And additionally, we also set aside about $1.3 million to support all electric, affordable housing and new market rate multi-unit dwellings. And we actually got some great applications within the city of San Luis Obispo. So should that program get re-upped by our board, we look to expand that to hopefully include developments in Paso Robles, as well as the other communities that are coming on board in January of 2021. So just another great opportunity for us to reinvest in the region. Our uninterruptible power supply fund is another very innovative and creative solution that our boards put forward. And right now we actually have $20 million set aside for financial support for our public sector. So just a reminder to the city of Paso Robles, for your critical facilities, whether it's your police station, fire station, water and wastewater services, your library, or even community services venues, those would all be eligible in January for this product and for this fund. So we're providing low-cost financial support to be able to provide you an opportunity to put backup energy supply for your critical load at those sites. So again, once the city enrolls, as well as any of the other public schools or public hospitals or water or wastewater districts within the city of Paso Robles, they also will be eligible for this fund once they enroll in January of next year. I did want to highlight, so as we kind of shift into what enrollment's going to look like, there are a little over 18,000 eligible customers that are going to be enrolling in January of 2021. The majority are residential. There are a fair amount of commercial customers and actually a few agricultural customers. But just to kind of put it into context, about 70% of the incoming electricity consumption does come from those commercial and agricultural customers. And so when you look at 178 million kilowatt hours, it's a fair amount amount of electricity consumption, and we're certainly supportive of providing all the information necessary for each customer to make the right decision for their home or business. I did want to remind the council and the community at large about our service offering. Each customer will be enrolled in 3C Choice. That's our new service offering. That is coming at a 2% discount compared to PG&E. But if there are some customers that support 100% renewable energy right now, they do have that option. So it's a small premium to help support California renewables in the form of wind and solar. So as we pivot this presentation about the enrollment, I want to highlight the fact that in January of 2021, the launch of service will happen for customers in Paso Robles, as well as the other communities that are within PG&E service territory. We've laid out a really comprehensive community enrollment plan. We've actually circulated that with staff, and we're actually hosting 2 webinars tomorrow at 11 a.m. as well as Thursday to introduce key city staff and county staff at our enrolling communities what this all is going to mean in terms of expectations, what MBCP is going to be doing, and how we help to leverage each city and county staff to make sure that information gets out to all the customers that are going to enroll. So we're really excited about this plan, and we really see this as a comprehensive document to guide staff who probably is not really well aware of what community choice energy is all about. So hopefully this becomes that hallmark document to get folks up to speed and really get excited about this enrollment. So in terms of the enrollment, as we discussed last year, the meter transition is going to happen in January of 2021. There's going to about, I think, 14 different billing cycles over the course of January. So that's when the virtual transition happens. But our work starts well before that with the community enrollment plan and starting to reach out to customers and community groups. But each customer will receive a notice 60 days before the enrollment. So in November, they'll receive another notice in December. The transition happens, and then by law, we have to send another notice 30 days after enrollment and then 60 days after enrollment. And then again, I just want to remind everybody that this is an opt-out model. We become the primary electricity service provider. But again, any customer can opt out at any time during this enrollment period. But if for some reason a customer does not do that and they decide to opt out maybe in May or June or August of next year, there is a small administrative fee that is $5 for residential customers and $25 for commercial customers. As I kind of wrap up my update, I did want to acknowledge the fact that we are doing that virtual enrollment orientation for city and county staff tomorrow and Thursday. We're excited to evolve into Central Coast Community Energy starting September 4th. And for folks who may not be aware, we actually did open up a satellite office in San Luis Obispo. And right now we have 2 staff. They are working remotely, but one is a energy public engagement associate. Another one handles energy accounts. We're actually actively soliciting a recruitment for a key account specialist. So I'll certainly circulate that job posting. We'd love to find another great local talent who's been working with, ag customers or business customers to kind of bring into the fold. And then again, we are moving forward with an annual meeting where we bring together all 32 of our member agencies to really talk about all things MBCP and what it means to each of their communities. And we've also set up a virtual advocacy roundtable to really talk with key community groups about important issues and help kind of inform the direction of the agency. So on that note, I conclude my presentation. I know we had a lot to go through. Hopefully I was succinct and efficient with everybody's time, but I'd be certainly happy to answer questions. And again, this is just the starting point for us to engage with the city of Paso Robles as we move through the enrollment. We all are certainly excited to engage with all the great staff members and community members in Paso to make this enrollment successful and make this agency work for your community.
Thank you for all that information. This is a presentation item. No action is required. That being said, comments from council. Councilman Strong?
No, it looks like a good program, and people do have the option right now to opt out without any charge if that's what they choose to do. And that's pretty good. But they're opting in for discounted power. That's pretty good, too.
Very good. Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
No, sir, no questions.
Thank you. Councilman Gregory?
Yes, I did have one question. Thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask how it might be different for us in rolling blackouts like we're experiencing right now with PG&E, with the Monterey Bay, or excuse me, the Central Coast Community Power Company.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gregory. It's great to hear your voice. Again, I know it's been a little while. Yeah, there is no difference. Again, ultimately, the California Independent Systems Operator is the one that's overseeing the entire electrical grid in terms of supply and demand. So they are the ones that are basically telling whether it's PG&E, SDG&E, or SCE, whether there's going to be a need to do rolling blackouts, because it's basically a supply and demand situation that if there's too much demand and not enough supply on the grid, then they're going to ask for rolling blackouts based on kind of where the concentrated demand is. So there's really no implication of whether or not you're served by MBCP or soon to be Central Coast Community Energy. But I think as we move forward, you know, programs like the UPS fund and other type of resiliency measures will be able to help customers that in case there is a rolling blackout or a public safety power shutoff, we have programs and opportunities for customers to have that backup supply to keep the lights on and stuff running if the grid does go down.
So those are basically smaller power grids that they could switch to?
Yeah, right now we're looking at on-site. So whether it be in a home, battery backup or whatnot, or at, you know, a fire station or city hall or something like that, it would be on-site, a backup supply for that particular customer, as opposed to kind of what you would move towards maybe microgrids, where you're kind of islanding a whole region out so they could be self-sufficient. But we're taking one step at a time with resiliency in terms of one customer at a time.
So that may be in the future where we could do microgrid work with you as an organization.
Yes, potentially. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. JR, thank you for the presentation. Question, is Central Coast Community Power still planning to do offshore wind power?
Thank you, Councilman Hammond. Well, yeah, to clarify, we did enter into a memorandum of understanding with Castle Wind. They are a subsidiary of a larger European offshore wind developer. And as you know, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, as well as the Department of Defense, they've set up, or at least not the Department of Defense, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management has set up these two kind of call areas to evaluate whether or not offshore wind would be feasible. So they're still working through that entire process in terms of the lease auction. But should there be a time where this particular entity were able to, win that lease auction, they were able to present us with competitive pricing for offshore wind, we're open to have that conversation. I think we're supportive of any technology that's going to drive down the cost and provide a reliable grid for all of California.
Great, thank you. Again, I'm happy that we're moving forward. Again, it gives our Roblins a choice. And with their power requirements, and competition is always good for the public. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public waiting with a comment or a question?
No, Mayor Martin.
Very good. Mr. Killigrew, thank you for your presentation. We do appreciate the information.
Thank you as always, Mayor Martin and City Council members, and we look forward to serving you very soon.
Very good. We move on now to item number 4, our capital project report. Ditas Esperanza.
So Ditas has dipped down in the barrel of your mayor and asked me if I, Dick McKinley, would be able to do this for her today. So I'll give it a whirl.
We're going to let you do that.
As we have kept the council updated on projects, we'll do that again tonight. So go ahead, Warren. Next slide. Thank you. So we are wrapping up work on the final leg of Spring Street from 24th to 36th. Some sections already have them, but other sections call for street trees. So this is street trees being installed. Next slide. We are also, when we do a paving job, they go through and they really pave over the manhole covers for sewer systems and stuff like that. And then the crews come back later and cut the asphalt off the top and make a nice, smooth, hopefully smooth transition for that utility cover to keep it from being damaged as cars drive over it. Next slide. So we are installing some ornamental street lighting along that way. We've had to wait for PG&E to get us prices, and so we could go on the street lights. We just got that the other day, so we're in the process of getting the street lights. But this is the bases for the lights, and so you'll see these on along the street. Next slide. So we also are wrapping up the project for paving Union Road along Barney Schwartz Park. The biggest thing left to go is the pedestrian activated crosswalk. Very important there because you have kids and parents that end up having to park on the north side of the road to go to the park on the south side of the road. And so having a protected crossing, flashing lights and things will be very important. But as you can see from the pictures now, the pavement is done. The striping is done, and it looks terrific compared to what this road used to be like. So one more, please. So, and then, as we said, we're waiting for the crosswalk. You can see in the photo at the left and at the right that the flashing signal bases are there and waiting for the signals to show up to complete the project. But it's a very nice project. And for the listening public, we did a force main sewer line and a recycle water line underneath this section of road. And while we were out there, we did the last 400 feet of the road to the city limits. So now when you come up to the city limits, our road is actually a little bit nicer than the county road for the first time in a probably very long time. Next slide. So let me say this before we go to the next slide on while we're on the roads. You know, Union Road, Barney Schwartz, Spring Street are roads that people have asked for years, and they're done. Sherwood Road, people complained for years, it's done. The Bolin neighborhood streets, people complained for years, they're done. Dry Creek Road is underway. You've already awarded the bid and it'll be constructed soon. Jardine Road, you entered into the partnership with the county, it is be constructed soon. So, you know, while statistically our pavement condition index hasn't really gone up very much, in reality, we've made some significant uses of the public supported supplemental sales tax funds to fix roads that are vitally important to the community. So these signs are also vitally important to the community. This is community wayfinding signs. So when people come to town and they're looking for the Children's Museum, or they're looking for how do they get back to the highway, or where's the library, where's the this and that, the wayfinding signs are crucial. So these signs have also been tied to coordinate with decorative lights in some cases. Next slide. So this project too, the wayfinding signs have been in the works for a long time, and the community finally came together with leadership from Travel Paso, the city, the chamber, and others to agree on designs, to agree on locations, and to agree. And so now you have them going up all over town, and it will be significant to the local community and to those who visit us. Go ahead, Warren. So the 21st Street Reservoir, also called the main west tank because it's the main water tank on the west side of the street. The tank right now is 80% complete, and so they're wrapping up that. It has 4 million gallons of water in it. It was cleaned out fully and then filled with water. It took 3 days to fill it round the clock, and it's there. So the remaining pieces of this project are some of the additional pipe work to connect it in the right ways to the city's water system, some wiring, some valve work, some backfilling and grading, and then, as promised from the beginning, paving of 19th Street and at the access road. But the project's coming along very, very well. So you can see in this picture, the black part is the coating over top of the other coating, and the dirt, the soils part will backfill up to that level of the tank. So That bottom part of the tank is in the process of being buried. Next slide. And by the way, that was one of the reasons why we went with the pre-stressed concrete tank, because you can't bury a steel tank at all. And so this is backfilling. You can see the less and less of the black bar at the bottom showing as the grading work continues and continues. And so you can see the really huge tall tank is starting to look like a lower profile, less obtrusive to the neighbors kind of a tank. But it's a wonderful tank. So, next slide. Okay, the good slide. So with that, we're excited to see these really important projects. As you recall, that tank was a 1915 tank. It was 100 years old. It was falling apart. And to have projects like that completed is great. Treatment plants completed and stuff. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. This again is a presentation item. No action is required. So council comments and questions. Mr. Strong?
No, everything is looking great. It's nice to see all the progress.
Thank you. Maria Garcia?
Yes, I just wanted to know on the street lights. It started at 24th, and how far are they going to go down?
So the decorative lights probably won't cover the whole distance because some of the areas are already well lit. And so we took a look at where they were needed. But I can't sit here right now, Councilmember Garcia, and tell you exactly the locations where they will be. I can get that information to you though.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Gregory?
Yeah, Dick, I just wanted to make a comment. I just want to say thank you for all your staff and your work on getting Union Road done, starting out Dry Creek, getting Jardine going, Sherwood Road, and Spring Street. It's really been an immense help for our community, and I just want to say thank you for your efforts.
Well, you're welcome. That's what we do.
Mr. Hammond?
I have no comment other than good job, Dick.
My comments also. Thank you, Mr. McKinley, for all the work and for that report tonight. You did pretty well at that.
Yeah, not as good as Detus, but
if I've kept track of this correctly, we move on now to a question for the city manager. Do we have any items to be deferred for this evening?
No, sir.
In that case, let us proceed further now to item number 12. Item number 12, discussion, City Council Annual Status Report on the short-term rental ordinance. Mr. Frace?
Mayor Martin,
yes.
This is Councilman Steve Gregory. I need to recuse myself from this item.
Thank you very much. The record will show that Mr. Gregory has left the virtual building.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is our annual status report on the short-term rental ordinance that the City Council adopted last year. This will be an annual report to the council. The current ordinance has a 3-year time period before it sunsets. So there'll be 3 of these reports, and then the council will make the decision on whether to extend the ordinance in 2 years. So what are short-term rentals? Just a reminder, they're also known as vacation rentals. They're basically defined as a rental of a residential unit for less than 30 days. There's 2 types. There's the home share, which is where the owner is on site with the guest overnight. And then we also have the non-hosted accommodation, which is the vacant house where the owner is off-site while it's being rented. Short-term rentals fall under the Transient Occupancy Code of the City Municipal Code. That's what regulates hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, and RV parks. Basically, these kind of lodging facilities are required to pay a transient occupancy tax, or the TOT tax. So short-term rentals have been added under this code. They also pay that TOT tax. This does not apply to long-term rentals. So any house or apartment that's rented for longer than 30 days is considered a long-term rental, is not subject to any of the rules that we're discussing tonight. So a little reminder just on the process, how we got here. From the period of 2015 through 2019, the city of Paso Robles conducted 35 public meetings to discuss short-term rentals. It started in 2015 with a council review of the policy in general. There was a short-term rental task force, the first one that was appointed by the city manager. They met throughout 2016. They forwarded a recommended ordinance to the Planning Commission in 2017, and then that ordinance went on to City Council, but it was not adopted. After that, it was reviewed again a number of times. In 2019, there was a decision made to re-impanel a new version of the short-term rental task force. They met a number of times, forwarded a draft ordinance to the Planning Commission around May of 2019. Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation to the City Council in June for consideration. The Council ended up introducing that June ordinance for first reading, but at second reading, that ordinance did not pass. It was referred back to staff for a rewrite. Then we started the process again in July. That resulted in the final adoption of the ordinance that we have tonight. Some of the key points that came out of that lengthy process were that we came up with a cap on the number of short-term rentals in the R1, which is our single-family zoning district. So the maximum number of non-hosted short-term rentals in the R1 district is 75. However, there was also direction that any R1 permit that had a business license when the ordinance was adopted was grandfathered in. So we actually, based on that, ended up issuing more than 75 permits. But over time, as we have a certain rate of attrition, eventually we'll end up with 75 permits in the R1 zone. The ordinance also includes parking and occupancy limits on short-term rentals. There's also a requirement for a minimum 100-foot distance separation for non-hosted short-term rentals in the R1 district. There's a total of 325 non-hosted permits throughout the city. So you have 75 in the R1 district. That leaves 250 for all the other zones in town. The hosted short-term rentals are not subject to any limitations. So here's a summary of our statistics on how many short-term rentals we've issued permits for to date. So in the R1 district, we've issued permits for 49 hosted and 122 non-hosted. So the limit here on the R1 will eventually be 75. So there's a total of 171 permits total in the R1 zones. The other zones in town, 65 hosted, 162 non-hosted for a total of 227. So the total hosted permits in town is 114, non-hosted is 248. So the 248 is under the 325 cap. That means there's 41 non-hosted permits still available outside of the R1 zone. So we've done some mapping, which isn't showing up on the screen right now, but we have all the sites shown in the GIS map. So we'll be able to zoom in. Actually, let me show you that really quick. So we have mapped all the short-term rentals by the red dots would be non-hosted, green dots would be the hosted. So we have them mapped throughout the town. So we'll be able to show those to you if there's any questions on that. We've also contracted with a service provider that tracks short-term rentals. The company is called Host Compliance. They're being paid for in part by the fees that were collected for the short-term rental applications. They do the address identification, then track those against website advertising. So they do compliance monitoring for us. So they give us monthly lists of both those that they believe are compliant and non-compliant properties that are being advertised on the internet. They have a proactive system where they'll be able to actually contact non-compliant operators and help us bring those into compliance. They also provide us with the 24-hour hotline service. That's a service that they also provide. So when we get complaints from neighbors, those are routed to their hotline, which then contacts the owner or their agent to resolve the complaint as required by the ordinance. And then they provide tracking of those complaints for us. In terms of our compliance rate, we believe that we have a minimum of 77% compliance with our ordinance requirements to have a short-term rental permit. We believe there's about 13% that are non-compliant at this point. There's another 10% that are being advertised. They're currently undetermined. A lot of short-term rentals will advertise on multiple sites. Sometimes the addresses aren't clear, and that's what sometimes results in this undetermined. But we continue to work with host compliance to refine that information. They also provide us a lot of information on the types of units that are being rented within the community. So recently, the information showed that 75% of the short-term rentals were in single-family units, 7% were in multifamily units. Number of bedrooms, the 2- and 3-bedroom units were the most popular for renting. Then number of units being advertised. I think the best data, starts in early 2020. Basically, we're showing about 300 units being advertised per week for rent in the city of Paso Robles. The majority of those are being rented for 1 to 7 nights. Very few are rented for longer than 7 nights. Host compliance also provides us the information on the hotline. So this kind of shows the graph in terms of how many complaints we've received. There was kind of an uptick in mid-July. Since then, complaints have seemed like they've come down a little bit. We can track which properties have received the most complaints. Staff has been working with the owners of 262 James Street and 405 Peachtree to resolve the complaints that we've been receiving there. These numbers of calls also include return calls from the agents responding to complaints. So that number isn't just complaints, that's all calls that went through the system as required by the ordinance. In terms of how we're tracking complaints and the enforcement procedures, basically we go through a process to determine when a complaint comes to the hotline, whether it ends up counting against the property or against the permit. We have the rule basically if you have 3 strikes in a year, that's grounds for revocation. If an owner or agent does respond to the complaint within the 30-minute period, that isn't counted as a strike. Also, sometimes the police department will be called out. If they call out and find no violation, that's also not a strike. But if the owner and agent fails to respond per the requirements of the code, that's where we end up with a strike. If we end up with 3 of these, that does move us into the revocation process. And there's other triggers for revocation, including failure to pay your TOT taxes, transferring the permits to another owner, which isn't allowed in the R1 zone, or other non-sanctioned activity on the short-term rental property. So the options tonight for the council to consider is 1, just to receive and file the report. 2nd is to provide staff with additional direction on updates to the process or requirements. Staff is recommending that we do begin 2 changes with the program. The first is to initiate compliance notification letters to all unpermitted and incorrectly advertised short-term rentals. And second is that we create a web-based short-term rental monitoring dashboard. Basically, that would provide the public and the council with up-to-date information on permit compliance and complaints that are being received. So that concludes staff's report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that information. We start off with council questions, and as we remind folks, we have a question period for the council for clarification from staff. After that, we go to public comment. When public comment is finished, then the council has the opportunity to make comments. So let's go to council questions of staff. Mr. Strong.
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Number one, on the map, there was also something that wasn't mentioned, and that was the non-compliant rentals that are shown as triangles. And there are quite a few in the city. Are those being abated?
So those are those 13% of the non-compliant ones that we believe exist, and that is recommendation 2 is now to start the process of contacting those and either getting them registered correctly or having them shut down.
Okay. Then the other thing I'm concerned with is I see that our revenue has been a total of $201,900 with host compliance contract expense of $26,000 plus and total staff costs of $74,000 plus. That's about half of all the revenue is going just out the door in trying to monitor this thing. Part of the whole reason for the TOT is so that those people pay some of their costs for the wear and tear that they cause to our streets and our services. And I'm wondering if there's any way to if you have any ideas as to how to improve those percentages.
So the idea was that this program would be revenue neutral. That was the intent. So to date, we have collected $201,000 in permit fees. We have a 3-year contract with host compliance that's basically about $80,000 in total. We've spent about $74,000 to date on staff time. So we have about $50,000 remaining for the next 2 years. I think that's part of our process is to monitor what the costs are ongoing. We believe we'll be pretty close to revenue neutral at the end of the period, as long as the enforcement process doesn't become too onerous. But I think that is what we'll be reviewing over the next year.
Okay, well, the other question then is when it's a matter of a violation, do we have any way to recover our costs on violations?
So if it becomes an actual code enforcement type violation that's beyond the scope of the ordinance, we do have other provisions within the municipal code for citations and cost recovery.
Okay, but those are not reflected in the revenues and expenses of the TOTs or of the short-term rentals.
That is correct. There is an attachment also in your staff report of the short-term rental TOT collections. So we've had a slight downturn since COVID kicked in, but we're still generating a significant amount of money annually from TOT for short-term rentals. So we're still in the $500,000 annual range for TOT collections.
Okay, my final question then is, I noticed that most of these non-occupied or non-owner occupied are in one area of the city. Yet we have 4 districts now as of the first of this year. And actually, they're already in existence, I guess. And those are by population or by voter use, whatever. Is there any way to regulate or make sure that as we move forward that this is more evenly spread throughout the city rather than all culminating in just a few neighborhoods? that highly impact the permanent residents?
Well, I think that was one of the goals of the ordinance by limiting the number of permits in the R1 zone was to try to limit the concentration of short-term rentals in the west side of town. So the lightest yellow area is the R1 zone. As we mentioned, we're over the 75 total because of the grandfathered permits. Over time, as we phase it down to 75, that should eventually result in a better even distribution of permits in the R1 zone, but that isn't necessarily the case currently.
Okay, so it's a matter of wait and see.
Yeah, then that's really the purpose of these annual reports, was so that the council could see if the rate of attrition in the R1 zone was actually producing the desired result.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia.
Yes, thank you. I have the same concerns about the, I know we discussed this in the ordinance, and but that is still my greatest concern. And then another one is the single-family units. I mean, that's 75% of these are single-family units. It's just in over the 1 year. I know we're looking at this. Do you see any kind of changes happening, or do you think, well, it just seems like more people want to rent, like you said, the 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom houses right now? And are you seeing more permits coming in for single-family homes?
So I think it's always been the understanding that the single-family home was the most desirable short-term rental product. That's definitely what we've seen in terms of applications and permits to date. I wouldn't expect that to be changing.
Okay. In our ordinance, I can't remember, did we ever discuss of maybe changing, what is the, on the west side, we call that mixed use, correct? And so is there, where is that highlight? Like from what street does that go? All the way up to 30th Street, the mixed use?
Yeah, so when we were going through the review process on the ordinance, we focused on the issue or the difference between the R1 zones and then the mixed use uptown zones.
Right,
so these colored areas, kind of the reds and orange areas, these are the uptown zones. So basically, kind of once you get to the west of Oak Street, you transition out of the uptown zone, and then you transition into the R1 and the R2 zones. Most of the units, or the downtown, what we call the T zones, because all those zoning districts start with the letter T, does have a fair share of the overall units. And then the West Hills, which is R1, has a similar number. So you can see within town, the vast majority of short-term rentals are located here. This is what we knew when we started the process. As we go across the river to the east side of town, the short-term rentals are very much more distributed and not as concentrated.
Okay, so one more time, you said from Oak Street west, that is considered the R1?
That's where the R1 zone starts. It's kind of a zigzag pattern, but definitely once you get past Olive, that's where the R1 is primarily.
And would you say that in that area is where a lot of the single-family homes are? Or are they more on the east side?
Well, you have single-family homes throughout the zone. So you have the historic kind of Victorians and bungalows that are concentrated around Vine Street. But then as you get up into the hills, Peachy Canyon, that sort of area, you have single family there, but more recent, more track house style. But they're all single family homes under, the building standards.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Warren.
More questions? Mr. Gregory?
He recused himself. So.
Oh, thank you for reminding me. Mr. Hammond?
None, thank you.
Very good. We've had council questions. We're going to go now to public comment. We have several people on my list. I'm not exactly sure if they're still waiting, but we will find out. Haley Tyson is at the top of the list. Haley, are you with us?
I am here.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you guys so much for having me, and thank you for adapting to a different way of meetings during COVID. I very much appreciate it. I wanted to start out, I have about 2 different questions regarding short-term rentals. My first is 75 permits seems like a very low number of permits for a destination like Paso. There's a lot of tourists who want to come here. We personally, my husband and I were married here. Almost 200 of our guests did occupy some sort of short-term rental. Do you see the number of permits increasing during these yearly reviews, or is it something that you guys are pretty certain is going to remain at a 75 number?
Okay, we'll get that answer for you at the end of public comment. So I've written it down. What's your next question?
Great. And then secondly, for my husband and I, we are actually looking to purchase a home currently in Paso Robles. We're local from the town. We have been living out of this state for quite a while, and now we're able to move back home and be near family. And in our personal life situation, we do have family on the East Coast with a disability. So the ability for us to purchase a home that allows a short-term rental is necessary for us. Is that something that we could get on a wait list without a purchase of a home, or will we need to have a home in order to then move forward with the application, knowing that our purchase of the home is contingent upon us being able to short-term rent it?
And we will get you an answer for that one also. Is there anything else?
That's,
okay.
Let me look at my, give me 1 second.
Certainly.
I think that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And just keep listening for a few minutes and we'll get you some answers to those questions. Okay, next up on the list, I have Stacy Jacob with Travel Paso. Stacy, are you with us?
Yes, good evening, Mayor Martin and members of the council. I'm with Travel Paso tonight, and I just wanted to comment and say thank you for all the hard work that you have done regarding short-term rentals. Travel Paso has been an active participant in the task force that was outlined. I personally was part of that when it very first started. And I wanted to, the recommendations set forth in terms that by staff, we believe and fully support moving forward with those. We are a big fan of the diversified ecosystem that we have here in terms of lodging partners with hotels, vacation rentals, and of course, RV parks. And we appreciate the level playing field in terms of the contribution to TOT and various assessments that come with all of that. So we recognize that there are there is a need for compliance in terms of the code enforcement, but I think the recommendations set forth with the dashboard and ongoing factors make a lot of sense. So the Travel Paso Board has discussed this and agrees with the recommendations of staff. Thank you for your time.
Very good, and thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Carol Jansen. Carol, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Mayor Martin. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks. Mayor Martin and the council members, a couple of points that I just wanted to address after looking through the staff report. I noted that the hotline complaints went back to, I think it was November, but I wanted council to be aware that many residents did not even receive notice of short-term rentals, the required notice under the ordinance until much later than that. I have 2 STR operations right next door to my home. I received notice for one in March and the other not until May. So I don't believe the complaints that are reported really reflect what has gone on in the past year since the ordinance was enacted. The report also mentions noise issues. I think the city needs to separately address STRs in the R1 zone. These businesses generate significantly more noise than typical homes, particularly on the west side, where the neighborhoods are predominantly populated by empty nesters and retirees, and we're a pretty quiet group. And STRs, unfortunately, are not. So I think the noise ordinances do need to be addressed specifically for the STRs. Councilmember Strong, thank you very much for acknowledging that the west side is clearly overburdened with STRs. And I also appreciate the suggestion that TOT dollars be used to repair our roads. That would be something that would benefit both residents and the tourists that come to visit. I would hope that because the west side is predominantly burdened by STRs, that the TOT dollars reflect that. The use of those dollars go toward benefiting west side residents in some way. In addition, kind of in comment to the other callers' comment that 75 is low, it absolutely is not, especially when you're someone who lives next to 2 or 3 SDRs. And I also think should we ever drop below the number of 75, that permits only be issued on the east side to try and balance things out and have some equity between the east and west sides of the city. Finally, my last comment was I had a concern that when the county had an order prohibiting tourists to stay in STRs, this was a couple months ago, due to COVID, that there were many STRs on the west side that I walk by every morning on my morning walk that I could tell they were rented out. And that was in clear violation of the county's prohibition that was designed to promote public health. I am surprised that the city is welcoming vacationers from other areas. You know the risk of COVID because the city's own COVID prevention flyer warns Paso residents not to travel outside of this county.
Yes, that's 3 minutes.
So I would hope that.
Yeah, that's 3 minutes. We appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You betcha. Next up on the call list, I have Beth Burke. Beth, are you with us?
I am.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is Beth Burke. I live at 1527 Park Street. I work for Paso Robles Vacation Rentals. I want to thank the city and the city staff for working closely with us as we fine-tuned and overcame some bumps in the road with the hotline. I welcome the completion of the rollout of permits, which has happened gradually over time. We are still waiting to receive a few, and we do send out neighbor letters within the time frame once the permit is received. I want to thank the staff for recommendations. We would love for the unpermitted STRs to be brought into the fold so that all of us are playing on a level field. And we'll have better community outcomes because they will be in the reporting system as well. And I welcome the increased transparency with the idea of reporting monthly the data. We've had a very few complaints, which we take very seriously. We're very responsive to, and they helped us work out the details with the hotline so that we're sure we get all the data on a timely basis. Tourism continues to contribute significantly to the economic engine and health of our community, supporting restaurants, wine tasting, retail, and all those employees who are local. We work carefully with our homes. We do remote check-ins. We don't interface with guests We work hard to limit our exposure to them and theirs to us. And we know that everyone in California has been encouraged to follow the same safety protocols. We don't think any of the increase in numbers in Paso Robles are due to tourism. Pismo Beach has a much more dense tourist population than we do, and their numbers are very, very low. So we don't see a correlation, certainly not causation. And I just want to let you know that we do everything we can to be as safe as possible. We're glad to be contributing to the health of the community economically and employment-wise. And I'm grateful to the City Council and staff for your hard work in the hotline area and getting compliance on its way. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I have no one else. You bet. I have no one else on my list. Is there anyone else waiting to speak?
No, sir.
Very good. We'll close public comment on this item, bring it back to the council. We do have several questions that have been asked. First of all, one of the callers asked about the potential of that 75 permit level increasing over time. I assume that's something that at the end of the first 2 years, the council at that time could discuss if they chose to. I don't think there's any prohibition. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the council sets the numbers. These are adopted by resolution. The council could increase them, decrease them, or leave them the same as the council sees fit.
Very good. And the question about being on a wait list, even though you don't own a property, can you apply for an STR permit if you don't own the property?
So the policy is that you have to apply for short-term rental on a property that you own or control. You cannot submit an application as a placeholder. That's due in part because there is a limit and there is a demand and there's already a waiting list in the R1 zones.
Very good. Another commenter was concerned that some of the STRs were not notified regarding the rules until March or May, even though our reports go back to November.
Yeah, and that's been part of the rollout process. The requirement was that every one of these short-term rental permits had to contact all their neighbors. And for the most part, it went surprisingly smooth, but with over 300 of these, not all of them, did it exactly correct. So we've been, doing catch up on some of them. So we believe that the majority did notify correctly, but there are clearly some that didn't get them out as soon as they probably should have. And we've been working with them to get them in compliance to make sure everybody has been properly notified.
Do you think that number was significant for reporting purposes, or are we getting a pretty clear picture here?
We don't believe it was significant. Typically short-term rentals, especially during the winter months, tend to not be as occupied as they are in the summer. So the expectation was coming into the summer months is when we have the maximum occupancy, and typically, historically, we've had the most neighborhood issues. And then I think with the COVID issue kicking in March, that basically tamped down the demand for short-term rentals even further. So I think seeing kind of that spike in July and August is probably pretty accurate in terms of actually where the real complaints were within the community.
Okay, and then comments about noise issues, particularly on the west side. What specific noise criteria are spelled out in the current ordinance, if any, and what's the flexibility as far as enhancing those in the future?
So during the deliberation process, there was a lot of discussion about noise standards for short-term rentals and whether there should be different, more restrictive standards for short-term rentals than for regular single-family residences. The council direction was that we needed to apply the same rules to short-term rentals as we do to single-family units. We did adopt an updated noise ordinance late last year that basically incorporated the new rules for single family. The short-term rentals are under the same rules. A lot of the, well, not a lot, but we have heard a number of complaints about pool use during the days at short-term rentals. And we understand that pools tend to be noisy during the day, but there is allowances in the noise ordinances for higher noise levels during the day. And because short-term rentals are treated the same as every other residential unit in town, noise from a pool does not violate the noise ordinance in almost all cases.
So if I understand the situation, if I'm living next to or near a short-term rental right now, and there is an ongoing egregious noise problem, and it's reported and not addressed, that would count as a strike, right?
Yeah, so if it's a violation, especially in the evening or nights, large parties, the process would be to report that to the hotline. That then starts a 30-minute clock for the agent or owner to basically address the situation and get it quieted down, and then call back to the hotline to report that it's been resolved. If that procedure is followed, then it is not a strike. But if the noise from the party continues on beyond that 30-minute window, then potentially it does get recorded as a strike.
Okay, and there's a question about in the future, as the number of short-term rentals naturally declines over time, if it drops below 75, is there a potential for future councils to sort of balance the community out and say, as short-term rental applications come in, we're only going to accept them on the east side so as not to overly saturate the west side?
I believe, yeah, under this table, this is out of your resolution, you could add more restrictions or provisions here in terms of how the R1 permits would be distributed throughout different districts. Right now, the R1 zone is just treated the same across the town, but the council could take action to change that.
Might want to put a bookmark on that for future discussion. And then finally, concern about alleged non-compliance with county orders regarding COVID. I would assume that that would fall under the inappropriate uses category. If someone were to report someone violating the COVID order, that would be a strike, wouldn't it?
Well, that's not as clear cut. Lodging facilities were deemed essential services, so they weren't supposed to be used for recreational uses, but for workers, business travelers, that sort of thing, that were conducting essential business, then they would be allowed to stay in a short-term rental. Trying to ferret out exactly how short-term rentals were used during that period of time would be extremely difficult at this point.
Okay, those are the only questions that I had. Let's go to council comments, and let's start at the top of the list with Mr. Strong.
Yes, thank you. In listening to the noise thing, the staff presented it absolutely accurately. But when we also mentioned that we could change how we allocate the number of permits in R1 by district or by neighborhood or something like that, I believe we could also segregate or segment our noise ordinance if we chose to do so. If the citizens on the west side, for instance, including the residents, wanted to also restrict themselves as to noise, they could become a zone, a noise zone. But I think that's something that we'd have to hear more from the residents as well. Other than that, I think the comments have gone pretty well. I am not necessarily in favor of restricting totally the total number of permits in the area if they are in the appropriate zones. We allow hotels in commercial zones. I see no reason why a residence, if it is in a commercial zone, for instance, or in a mixed use zone, couldn't still be used for that purpose. But we also then have to keep our eye on the RENA numbers and how we meet our housing demands for permanent residents. And that's another important consideration that we have to balance in this whole equation. And I think that's where I'm at. As it stands now, I think the staff recommendations are appropriate for this review. We might want to look into and ask for staff to come back with some way to assess if we want to make any changes to the noise ordinance for the west side. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
Yes, thank you. In my report, it says initiate enforcement. But then on the screen here, it says initiate compliance notification letters. So are we saying that we want to just do a notification at this point for the unpermitted?
It means the same thing. Okay. So enforcement and compliance mean the same thing. It's basically to bring everybody, make sure everybody's following the rules.
And on the letter, is there going to be a cost to let them know? Like, no, is there an enforcement cost? Like, if you have so many days, is there, what's content of the letter?
Oh, so the content of the letter, we don't have that yet. Okay. That'll be the first step. Typically what we do is we'll have kind of an initial first letter that's more just informative. If we don't get compliance at that point, usually then there's even a second letter that starts to kind of ratchet up the consequences. And then if we don't have compliance there, then we start to move into basically the code enforcement kind of arena. So there's kind of different letters for each step.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Hammond.
No questions.
Very good. We've had our chance to make our comments. We've had our public comments, so now it's time to take some action. I don't see a resolution here. Mr. City Manager, is this something you just need direction and you don't need an actual action?
Mr. Mayor, I would think that based on the discussion we've already heard, these two recommendations staff can implement without council direction. I don't think that there's a reason for the council to have to take action tonight. I think you're just receiving and filing.
Very good. So without objection, we'll go ahead and receive and file that report. And the staff will initiate compliance notification letters and create a web-based short-term rental monitoring dashboard.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Moving on, we have item number 13, preliminary year-end budget report, fiscal year 2019-2020. Mr. Cornell.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Tonight, I will be presenting the preliminary results of the previous fiscal year. It's those activities beginning on July 1, 2019 and ending on June 30th, 2020. So yes, we are 2 months after the end of the fiscal year, but in accounting, we like to take a lot of the transactions that actually occurred in July and August and apply them to the previous year. As an example, like if a contractor performs work in the city for the month of June, they are likely to invoice the city in July and us actually making that payment in July or August. So even though those payments were made after the end of the fiscal year, we still account for those expenses in June. So keeping that in mind, we are still closing the fiscal year and making year-end adjustments. So the amounts presented tonight in the staff report are considered projected. They are unaudited. The annual financial audit will be conducted in about October time with cash flow presentation in the final numbers presented to the City Council towards the end of this year. But because of this pandemic and its huge impacts it has had on the economy, we thought it was necessary to give you a preliminary results of what happened last fiscal year. Again, a lot of it has to do with certain assumptions that were used in the budget, and we just want to make sure that those are still valid. So still have a lot to discuss tonight, but just to kind of give a preview of the results, the city finances are neither significantly better nor significantly worse. So I think you'll see in the conclusion of tonight's presentation that I think we should just continue to stay the current course we're on. So why are we talking about fiscal year 2019-20? That year is over, and shouldn't we focus on the now? And I agree, absolutely. But the budget that was adopted a couple months ago did have some built-in assumptions. And one of the reasons for this presentation and this report is to revisit those assumptions and make sure they're still valid. The biggest and one of the most important assumptions is the beginning reserve balances. That the reserve balances is kind of another way for an emergency fund. This figure was important because we wanted to make sure that ending reserve balances for June 30th, 2021 was no less than 30% of general fund expenditures. So what is included in the budget showed a beginning reserve balance of $18,078,003. This figure can be shown or can be found on page 8 of the budget report. We are now currently projecting $18,102,061. That's a difference of just under $25,000. So the very first assumption used in the budget is pretty much spot on. In the next 2 quarterly reports, which we're anticipating for council presentation in October and January, we'll dive into the revenue assumptions and ensure that those are still valid. We didn't want to talk about current year revenues quite yet because, like I said before, a lot of the revenues that we're receiving the last 2 months are being pushed back to the prior fiscal year. In addition to that, the budget also included certain expenditure reduction assumptions. I'll touch base on those later on in the report and just kind of remind everybody what those entailed. But ultimately, the goal of this year's budget was to ensure that we ended the fiscal year with 30% reserves. That would leave about $10.6 million in there. Make sure that none of the assumptions that we use were overly optimistic or overly conservative. And if they were, then we could adjust and act immediately. That's the kind of the flexibility component we were looking for. And then lastly, and not least important, but to ensure that we maintain a continued high level of service to the community. So this graph shows projected general fund revenues at different times during the fiscal year. Each one of these color represents a revenue source. So this would be sales tax, property tax, TOT, and kind of all the other little expenditure or revenues that we receive. Each bar represents a different time in the last fiscal year. This first one being when we adopted the budget in June of 2019. The second one being the mid-year projection. So at mid-year, we're seeing revenues come in just a slightly higher. And then COVID-19 hit and everything came to a halt. And so when we were doing our preliminary discussions on the fiscal impacts of COVID-19 at the end of March, we were kind of thinking that the revenues would land kind of in the $40 to $42 million range. So good news is the revenue loss wasn't as bad as we initially thought. We're kind of over in this area now where there is a little bit of an improvement than what we had projected back in March. So back in March, we had anticipated a $4 to $6 million loss. And like I said, it's closer to about 3.2. So yes, good news is revenues didn't come in as bad as we thought. The bad news is it's still a $3.2 million revenue loss. And furthermore, that $3.2 million revenue loss happened over just 3 months. At the end of the day, expenditures still exceeded revenues by about $1.7 million. So not surprisingly, sales tax and TOT had the largest impacts, representing about $1.4 million from sales tax and $1.7 revenue loss out of TOT. Further reductions are assumed in fiscal year 2021, about $900,000 in sales tax and another $400,000 in TOT, mainly because of the continued and prolonged shelter-at-home mandates. Overall, though, the revenue loss for next fiscal year is still assumed to be $5.1 million. So in January time, we did a 10-year forecast period, and go figure 2-3 months later, it kind of is no longer valid. But I wanted to show you the actual revenues. This is for sales tax. The actual revenues we received since 2000, what the forecast period was projecting it out to be, and then more kind of along the lines of where we're kind of falling. So significant revenue losses in sales tax. here. But one thing I did want to kind of point out, though, is that we were actually already projecting or forecasting that sales tax revenues would be flat and actually start declining in about 3, 4, or 5 years. And so as a result, even though, yes, we've had a significant loss of revenue, in order to kind of get up to the forecast, it's not as nearly as a gap to fill had we been aggressive on our sales tax growth.
Ryan, before you go to the next slide, you might want to explain the precipitous drop in 25-26.
Thank you. The big drop off, well, actually the big increase here and the big drop off here represents the supplemental sales tax that the half-cent that currently is planned to sunset in 2024. TOT on the other hand has a different story. So same graphics as last time, where the blue is the actual, the orange is the 10-year forecast, and the gray is the updated projection. We didn't forecast a decline or any sort of flattening of TOT because even during the Great Recession years, kind of through here, there was never a year-over-year decline. Yeah, there was a little bit of a slowdown here, but again, nothing that indicated a downturn. So we were a little more aggressive on this revenue source in the 10-year forecast, expecting a 7 to 10% growth. But the pandemic has actually caused the revenues to decline for the first time since I have records of us showing TOT revenue. So again, as we see for this year, revenues are down, but the harder thing is the compounding factor of really trying to get back up to this kind of trend line that we're expecting in the forecast. So when we do update the 10-year forecast, we'll definitely have to revisit what we assumed for TOT revenue. Switching over to general fund expenditures for the past year, there was about $50 million in budgeted appropriations with about $45 million spent. So we had about a budget savings of about 5.7 million and is about 89% of appropriations. Half of which came from personnel. That's a combination of employee vacancies, employee turnover, as well as implementing the hiring freeze in March when the pandemic started, as well as the deferral of the Section 115 pension trust payment. Another $1.9 million worth of savings comes from operating expenses. That's mainly due to the discretionary spending freeze that was implemented. And then an additional 1.3 million of budget savings came from council's actions to defer and eliminate certain capital projects.
Ryan, just a moment, please. I'm looking at my participants list. Is Councilman Gregory on board with us? I don't see his name.
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. I'm sorry. Please proceed.
No problem. So, and then when we examine the expenditures by department, we can see that each department has contributed towards the savings. There wasn't one department that had significantly more savings than any other one. So the police department was under budget by about 1.7 million. That's about 85% of appropriation spent there. Community services under budget by $1 million at about 88% of appropriations spent. Similar figures with admin services and public works at about 86 and 89% of appropriations spent. Community development and city manager's office and city council funds were under budget by 600,000 and just under 500,000 for those two departments. So for the most part, everybody was kind of hovering right around 85 to 88% of appropriations, except for one department. And I'm going to kind of pick on Jonathan in emergency services. They were the ones that actually spent 100.9% of their budget and was selfish and didn't contribute to any sort of savings. But they were also the ones, or that was where we also coded all the COVID-19 expenses that came up towards the end of the year. So that's right around $400,000 that we spent on COVID-related expenses. So I suppose I'll give Jonathan a break this time. But all kidding aside, though, the budget savings really is a testament to the dedication of the directors, the managers, and the employees, and really tightening our belts during fiscal constraint. So I would love to say that, I'd love to take credit for all the budget savings, but again, it really goes to the departments. So I also wanted to provide City Council with a reminder of all the budget reductions that was approved and assumed in the current year budget, because we have really reduced our expenditure needs by more than $7 million. So this includes the elimination of the Quad-X program for the year, the elimination of the Section 115 trust contribution, reducing citywide contingency and set-aside dollars, elimination of 11 capital projects, including the Morgan Center, and only having our community partner contributions for 6 months of the fiscal year, and so on. The next expenditure reductions that we haven't met yet is the towards the bottom here of the voluntary salary savings. So we are currently working on that, and we'll have an update to the layoff prevention plan to City Council at the next meeting. So overall, the fiscal year 2020-21 budget is $46.3 million in expenditures. That doesn't include this expenditure reduction. So in other words, we've kind of reduced our expenses by about 15% in order to offset the revenue loss from COVID. This concludes my presentation for tonight. I did want to end in reiterating that the information that we've seen so far, things aren't significantly worse, nor are they significantly better. So staff's recommendation is to kind of stay the current course. We will have major quarterly reviews for first quarter in October and second quarter in February. And then we'll also have the CAFR presentation, which is the audited financial statements towards the end of this year. With that being said, Mr. Mayor, happy to answer any questions, listen to any comments or concerns you may have.
Thank you very much. Council questions of staff. Mr. Strong?
Yes, this is a very good news in some ways. I'm glad to see we've been able to maintain our reserves and that we're staying pretty much on course. Things are about as bad as we thought they'd be. You know, there's some things that we can make a difference in. We can't necessarily accomplish it, but we can at least make an effort. And one of those is sales tax, and that's one of the biggest places we're taking hits. Now, there is an effort at the state level through the League of Cities and at the national level through the League of Cities and through other organizations as well to attack online sales tax collection. Online sales frequently do not pay sales tax. And it's very important that the state gets on top of that and stays on top of it. It's also important that we work at the federal level to maybe see that the federal government enforces that if you buy something, it's a sales tax. So you should pay the sales tax where the sale occurs. Now, the question of where that sale occurs becomes a big point of contention when we're talking in that particular area, which is going a little deeper into this than we have to in this particular discussion. But it's very important that we stay on top of staying active at those two levels to try to eventually affect gaining that revenue back, because that's where our brick and mortar stores are going. They're getting greatly hurt by the tendency of people to do more and more buying online. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 and all of its restrictions are now encouraging even more online sales rather than in-store sales. And that's creating a habit pattern that is going to affect our financial situation tremendously. So that's something I think we really have to stay on top of. Thank you.
Council questions, please. Councilwoman Garcia.
No questions. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for the report.
Councilman Gregory.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions for Ryan. So Ryan, it looks like were these savings in all the departments anticipated in the budget?
So when we did the mid-year review, we were kind of projecting to be about 94, 95% of appropriations spent. and we ended up actually coming closer to 90%. So we actually had more savings than we anticipated. Again, mainly due to the mechanisms that was enacted to help reduce the impacts of the revenue loss.
And then as far as the other savings that we've put into place as a council, the last item we're waiting to hear for is your layoff prevention program.
Yes, so correct. The next step of that is trying to get some sort of voluntary reductions in staff levels, and that's going to be presented to City Council on September 1st. All the other assumptions or reductions in expenses for the upcoming year have been met or are projecting to be met. That was kind of the last big one that we needed to address.
So all those are in effect and active right now, correct? So.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much for your report.
Councilman Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ryan, again, looks like the next stop sign, so to speak, to take a check on things is October 20. That's basically the first quarter of our fiscal year. At that point, you'll have options again for us to review, essentially like we did in the beginning, correct? When hopefully things are better, but if not, then we'll make further reductions as necessary. Is that the plan for October 20?
Yes, sir.
Right. And so again, I want to thank you for your report. Again, it's clear that, reduced 50% overall in our spending. Plus, again, we injected with our reserves to keep the public from having such a hit on services. But again, we're not at all done yet. So moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's look at the public comment. Do we have anyone online waiting to comment?
No, sir, not on this item.
Very good. Thank you. We will close public comment, bring it back to the council for discussion and action. Mr. Strong?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I will first apologize for jumping ahead and making a comment rather than asking a question.
We're all human.
It wasn't really a question. But I would add one more thing to that. That is that it also emphasizes the importance of our tourism. Because tourists are the one group of people who do most of the buying in brick and mortar stores because they want to take back things from where they have visited. It's part of the whole normal tourism process. So whatever happens with COVID-19 and how we attract or can safely attract and continue our long-term historical tradition of hosting tourists in this city is very important to our budget as well. And I hope we can continue to do that. Thank you.
Very good. Councilwoman Garcia.
No, sir, nothing to add.
Thank you. Councilman Gregory.
I'd just like to make a comment about the budget. I'd like to thank the city and everybody who's assisting small businesses to stay alive by the parklets out on the street and helping everybody try to get by this time in COVID. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond.
I just want to thank all of our departments. This is a team effort, no question about it, to keep doing the services that the public requests and also still do it with the least amount of manpower and cost. So, Mr. Mayor, again, if you have anything further, I would make a motion to receive and file the report and look forward to another 60 days for another review.
Is there a second?
And I'll second that.
Motion by Councilman Hammond, second by Councilman Strong to receive and file. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Hammond?
Aye.
Councilmember Strong?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
And Mayor Martin?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Item number 14, the future of the Integrated Waste Management Authority and the city's approach in achieving the desired future. Mr. McKinley?
Yes, Your Honor, members of the council, I'll try to keep my part brief. And then we have Brooks Stayer here. He's the hired head of IWMA, and Councilmember Hammond is your liaison to IWMA who serves with honor distinction. So in May 10th, 1994, the city joined the Joint Powers Agreement to become part of, to form IWMA and become part of the board for IWMA. IWMA has looked at lots and lots of issues. They are a primary agency who represents all of the cities in SLO County plus the county with the Cal Recycle Board and helps administer Cal Recycle programs, grants, and other state unfunded mandates for us. We are, they deal with ones that are specifically required. There are a whole list of them in the JPA. And from time to time, they stroll into issues that are solid waste, but aren't specifically required, like the whole styrofoam conversations that you've had. So, but IWMA is charged with balancing the needs and values of the various member agencies in order to adopt policies that best serve the overall county. And there's the rub, because who decides what's in the best for the overall county? And the answer is the board, but the board isn't always balanced to be equal and fair. And so what I'd like to do at this point is to, and you've all read the packet, there's a ton of information in there. You've all been briefed on the subject by it's a pretty voluminous part, but the JPA is in here and stuff like that. So if, with your indulgence, Mayor, I want to turn the time over to Brooke Stayer to go over what happened at the August 12th board meeting and where the IWMA appears to be headed in their strategic planning. And then following Brooks's comments, I think it would be most helpful to the council if your liaison, Councilmember Hammond, spoke to you all about concerns and where it's at and where it's headed. With that, Mr. Stayer, please.
Thank you, Mr. McKinley. Can y'all hear me okay?
We can.
So I apologize that we couldn't get all this information from the meeting, but it was the same day your agenda was due. But what happened last Wednesday was the board approved our mission, values, and vision statements as they were written. So there was no issue with that. There was one objective of that, and in your packet, it's 7E, and it basically defines the authority of the agency versus the authority of the members of the agency. And so, I don't know if you scroll to that slide so they can see that. I think it's probably the 5th or 6th slide there. We can talk about there it is, right there. Number 5, or it's E in your packet, revising the JPA to include additional measures for local control. And right now, anything the IWMA passes as an organization trumps what you would do locally. And so most of the members of the agency like what the agency does, but if you don't, and so that, again, you've just discussed it, that's the rub. So what we're going to do is probably in November, we would bring back some options for number 5 there that would run the gamut of the IWMA can pass any ordinance they want and all the members have to accept it, would be one extreme. And the other extreme we would only pass state mandates and then each jurisdiction could pass whatever they want, which is what you were allowed to do now. You could pass any ordinance of your own outside of the JPA. But in the middle there is where we'd like to be, and that's somewhat discussed in the packet that Mr. Kinley put for you, that you could have some system where the IWMA passes mandates that are required by the state, and then they would draft some model ordinances or best practices or something along those lines, and then your jurisdiction could decide to adopt those and enforce those. IWMA would just do education on those items. So it looks like there's a way forward, and I think the majority of members would support somewhere in that middle ground there, but we won't know that until November. And then when it does happen in November, we would amend the JPA based on the majority vote of the board, but then each jurisdiction, including Paso Robles, would have to adopt that as an agency for the JPA to continue. So did I leave anything out there Tom or Dick?
No, I think that mostly covered. I mean, the long and the short of it is, do we find a way to work through the JPA to bring issues under control, like 5 says, or do we decide that we don't want to be in the JPA anymore? We go on our own, and then we individually as a city would fund and do all of the work to meet all of the state mandates, right? And so what Brooks is saying, and it seems like what came out of the August 12th is, let's keep the band together. Let's keep the JPA. Let's keep using IWMA to do all of the state mandates, but let's look at a way to restore local power over the items that aren't state mandated. Did I get you correct, Brooks?
Yes, you did. And I would also mention Councilman Hammond is very astute and knows what's going on, so he can chime in here as well.
So this is his turn. So
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Well done. Again, to the rest of the council and public, I think there's great value in IWMA as Paso Robles participates through the past years. However, in the last few years, it's changed in that they are using the agency to govern other cities. Every city has always had its own opportunity to pass whatever laws they want with regard to recycling. And it's kind of been an overreach lately, and that's been the pushback. Both county and North County cities have had some issues with what's going on. So we brought up the opportunity to talk about rewriting the JPA. The agreement needs to be reviewed. It hasn't been looked at in quite some time. So this next meeting that we're going to be having through IWMA should come out with some final things to bring back to our council. I didn't want to speak directly for our city. I'd rather have Dick bring this item to council to get you up to speed with regard to what has been happening down there. But again, certainly we can do what we want here with our own, and we've been exploring that. Dick has actually got R3 retained to figure out just exactly what the city would have to cost to move forward on our own. Same way with the county. Different agencies, still have to go through the mandates that Cal Recycle is going to want. And I don't have a problem with, moving forward over time with state mandates, but it seems like the chair, the authority of IWMA has been more, let's be the first in California to do something. And with, a lot of our constituents up here pushing back, I represent our constituents. I've been speaking to that at IWMA, and it's come to this point where we're actually now reviewing the whole agreement through the joint powers. So I think it's a good thing to talk about this after so many years. Hopefully, again, we can stay in IWMA, and again, it'll be the council's direction to do that. But this is the first step to kind of start discussing the whole issue, and I'm glad we're here.
Okay, thanks, John. I think we're going to be asking you questions as well as staff, so I'm going to start with Fred.
Well, I don't think I really have any questions because I was one of our former representatives on IWMA many years ago. And there's very similar issues here to other things. So I don't really have questions. I'll wait for comment period. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
No, sir, no questions right now.
Thank you. Councilman Gregory?
I'll reserve my comments for the next step.
Thank you. I have some comments too. I do want to ask Councilman Hammond, the nature of IWMA seems, as you said, to have been changing over the last few years, and obviously it's significant enough for it to come before us tonight. And so when we get to our discussion part, I would really appreciate your input on which way you think we should go. So, okay. With that, we're going to go to public comment. I don't see anyone on the list. Do we have anyone who wants to speak?
No, sir.
Okay, so let's bring it back to the council. And John, if you would, you've been up close and personal with us for a long time now. Of these alternatives we're looking at, what do you think is the best way forward for us?
Again, I would really prefer to see the JPA rewritten in that anything state mandated, we of course as a JPA address. Anything beyond that, which is kind of what's been happening, brought up through the executive committee through the IWMA, pushes other items into ordinances that are not really needed as of yet, or again, or maybe politically people are wanting them. Take, for instance, the bag ordinance years ago, where we were told again to do it, in that basically Paso Robles did not want to do this. Same way with the styrofoam, which is actually on hold right now. But all the other cities could have done their own ordinances, but because North County, I think it was Tascadero and Paso Robles, did not pass these organizations went after the IWMA to compel our North County cities to do what they would like to see done. That was the rub. And again, this is the issue, is that we're all about recycling. Again, we need to take care of the environment, but Paso Robles can govern itself. And I think that's really what I've heard from so many constituents, and that's what I've been carrying down there. But the issue here, again, is that we want to stay, in my opinion, in IWMA. We have SB 1383 coming through with so many more regulations that California wants to put in. And again, we all live in California. If we're going to be here, we're going to be on board, which we will do. But I don't feel like we have to be the first in the state to do things. And I also preferred, like I've always done through all my career as a politician here, is that, we govern through education. We want people to do the right thing. We do not have to absolutely put ordinances in to compel people to do it. I've already seen in the last few years, a lot of our restaurants are already using disposable containers that aren't styrofoam. I mean, it's already happening. So those are the things I think education especially is huge. And IWMA has a great department that does this for us in the county. And that's, again, my thought is to, we want to stay associated with IWMA, but on the other hand, there's other groups that are wanting to leave as well. So I'm a little concerned about the group, the IWMA organization, if we were to depart. And also, even if we do depart, we're still going to have to be in compliance with the state, which is going to cost us some funds here, and which, again, it's all about constituents and tax dollars being spent. So that,
Mr. Mayor,
let's be careful. Don't let them out.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask Mr. Hammond a question just to clarify?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So Mr. Hammond, again,
just a moment, please. Councilman Strong, your mic is on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So I'm just trying to follow up on the conversation with Brooke Stayer about the session that the board had on the 12th and this number 5. So do you think that the number 5, if it's done correctly, that's on the screen in front of us about revising the JPA agreement, do you think if that's done correctly that solves our issues for now, mostly?
Well, I would hope. I mean, again, this is something that I would bring back to this council to review and take forward back to the IWMA as a vote, up or down. But I hope so. I think this is very important. Through our strategic planning, we came up with these 5 items. There was much discussion this last meeting about a week and a half ago about that number 5. Some of the more radical, I would call them radical, but the more progressive cities wanted to change the verbiage on it, but we kept it as is. And again, we're going to bring it back. I've spoken to our legal counsel through the IWMA. He's in agreement that the JPA needs to be reviewed. It really does. And so it's time, essentially, to do that. I think, again, if we have more flexibility where the IWMA brings forward state mandated product and that we all need to comply with, but also doing the education part of it is really the biggest value that I see. I think that we can get by and stay on with the IWMA. But again, this is a work in progress still. I think Brooks has got a lot on her shoulders. He's fairly new year or so onto IWMA, and he's doing a great job as executive director. But with the COVID and all these issues going on, it's pretty tough. But I think, again, this next meeting, we should see some resolution and obviously something to come back to us to discuss further.
Very good. Okay, further council comments? Councilman Strong. Councilman Strong, you with us?
Okay, yeah. No, it was, I had a technical issue. Okay. Actually, Councilman Hammond and I are very much in agreement on this one. And this is one of those cases, it's a principle. It's a basic government principle. This is a principle that I've been trying to follow for decades. Back in the 1970s, when the state of California created regions, I opposed the way they were being created because they were going to be a whole new layer of government. We do not need more and more big brother every time we turn around. Our liberties and our freedom are very important to the American people, and I think we have to do everything we can to maintain personal choice wherever it's really reasonable to have it. Government needs to do what has to be done that individual people can't do by themselves. But let's keep government into its proper perspective. And I think John is trying to do exactly that with IWMA. I would hate to see us have to leave IWMA, but if it becomes absolutely essential because they're going down a wrong path, then that may be what we have to do. But in this particular case, I think we need to give our community its chance to make its own decisions and individuals their chance to express themselves and live the lives that they want to live. Now, be that as it may, people should be responsible and should be educated. And the educational role is a very important one. And I'm just 100% behind what John has been trying to do. And I understand that our restaurant industry needs to be educated, and they also need to get on board with their customers and figure out what is economically feasible for them, as well as what's best for the environment. It's a combination, it's a balancing act. And if we don't balance things, we're in big trouble. So I completely support the direction that John is going in, and that the agency is going in with going back to where they take care of the state mandates, and the rest is up to the individual cities and the members. But they can educate, they can suggest, they can give us draft model ordinances that we can consider, but then the decisions are up to us at the local level. That's my position.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia.
Yes, thank you. I agree, and I appreciate Mr. Hammond's attending and all his hard work. I know that every time he would report on this, I could hear his frustration, and so I agree with his comments. And I really do think that our Roblins here, our Paso Roblins, would love the education. I know that they do that at school as far as waste reduction and recycling through our schools. So I agree that our Roblins here are very efficient and would love just to be educated instead of us having to make another ordinance for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory.
Yes, I'll concur with both Fred and Maria and John. I think John's done a great job of representing how Paso Robles feels about this. It's very important that we're not hit with unnecessary regulation that we don't want to be part of. And I think John has been frustrated with the process, and we need to do whatever we need to do to follow what the state's asking us to do, but not have other people tell us what to do that's not necessary. And let's make our community choices. And I agree with what Maria said about education. We're very good at education in our town, but we don't want to have to accept something that's forced on us. So I agree with the way John is proposing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're unanimous on this. I would recommend that we have a motion to direct our representative to represent the city in the following ways. First of all, it is our preference to stay in and maintain the IWMA, provided that the IWMA is altered to address only state mandates and that any actions in non-mandated areas would result in non-regulatory advisories and best practices documents.
I would
Mr.
move
Mayor?
to approve that.
I have a motion
Mr.
by
Mayor?
Councilman Gregory. Is there a second?
No. Mr.
Do
Mayor?
we have a second? Well, wait, let me see if I can get a second. Is there a second?
I will second that.
Thank you. I have a motion by Councilman Gregory, second by Councilwoman Garcia. Mr. Strong, discussion.
Yes, my discussion is I don't think we should instruct John to do anything. We have a Brown Act that says we are supposed to go into public hearings without a position, without having made our decision in advance, that we have to listen to what is said before we make that decision. I think John has the ability to make good decisions and to know what we feel and what we would like to see. But I believe it has to be his decision as to exactly what motions to support or to object to. We don't know today exactly how those motions are going to come out. For us to give him instructions, we can be tying his hands to take an action that really isn't in our best interest. I don't think we should instruct him. I think we should recommend to him what we believe he should do in principle. I would like to see that amendment to the motion.
Very good. So I certainly recognize and respect the Brown Act. Does the city attorney have a comment on the appropriate action to take?
I think the action can simply be to provide direction or recommendation to Councilmember Hammond to pursue amendment of the Joint Powers Agreement, as you noted, for state mandates, with a focus on the state mandates.
So if we alter the motion to say this is our recommendation to him as representative, that would be appropriate?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory, is that okay with you?
Yes, as long as Councilman Hammond's comfortable with that.
I think I have the consensus of the council listening to everyone. Thank you.
Gotcha. Councilwoman Garcia, you okay with the second to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Gregory?
Aye.
Councilmember Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Hammond?
Aye.
Councilmember Strong?
Aye.
Mayor Martin?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. And John, thank you for all the work you've done on that board. That's been a huge assignment over the years.
Yeah, it's a long road, but we're still going. Thank you.
There you go. Moving on. Item number 15, addressing recent and projected increases in COVID-19 cases in Paso Robles. Mr. Frucci.
Actually, Your Honor, Mr. Stornetta will start the item and I'll finish up with him.
Good evening, Mayor Martin and members of the council. Jonathan Stornetta, Fire Chief. At the state level, California reported just over 6,400 new cases of COVID-19 as of Sunday. The state now has a total of 628,031 positive cases, which is an increase of 113,000 cases since our last report to the council. There have been a total of just over 11,000 deaths in the state, an increase of over 1,800 deaths since our last report. Case rates are slowly decreasing statewide by 6.5% case rate. Hospitalizations have decreased 21%, and ICU hospitalization rates have decreased 16%. Next slide. While we are currently seeing a slight decrease in the case rates throughout the state, we are seeing an increase here locally. At the county level, San Luis Obispo County remains on the monitoring list, primarily due to the elevated disease transmission indicator regarding case rates. As of today, San Luis Obispo County has 636 confirmed new cases over the last 14 days. This is an increase of 103 cases over the previous 14-day period. Considerations for going off the state monitoring list will not start until our case rate is around 285 cases in a 14-day period. So we're almost twice that right now. Next slide. The slide before you here is not current, and I apologize for that. We had some intermittent internet activity throughout the day, so I will provide you the correct data. Overall, San Luis Obispo County has had over 2,500 confirmed cases and 19 deaths. That's an increase of 669 new cases and 3 deaths since our last council report. At this time, there are 430 active cases, an increase of 113. The Paso Robles area still has the majority of active cases in the county. Paso Robles case count continues to increase at a faster pace than other areas of the county. Next slide. So what does this recent increase mean for us? With the rates of infection increasing in Paso, our chances of contracting the virus and a higher risk of unknowingly spreading the virus to others. Additionally, it's important that we remain vigilant. Our surrounding counties are still seeing a large increase in positive cases. For example, Kings County has over 2,300 active cases, Monterey 2,600, Fresno 12,000, and Kern County over 18,000. Many of these individuals visitors to our area. And with that, I will turn the rest of the presentation over to Mr. Furci.
Thank you, Chief. Next slide, please, Warren. So we really believe there are 3 primary areas of concern for us here in Paso. And as we try to remind the community, the statistics that are published by the county for Paso really include the entire 93446 area code, not just within city limits. But for us within city limits, and clearly our neighbors just outside city limits, as I say, we believe there are 3 primary areas of concern. One is just gatherings, and we're not talking about formal events because those are almost completely stopped, but it's parties, it's neighborhood dinners, it's birthday events, those kinds of things where people, and we're social animals, we like to get together, but unfortunately when we have gatherings that include more than just our family, we are significantly increasing the risk of transmission. And as all of us know from reading the literature, there are super spreaders and super spreader events. That's not a criticism of anybody. It just means that some people at a certain point in the course of their infection happen to be in an environment where viruses are spread broadly to a large number of people, and then that goes from there, and it's an exponential risk of transmission. So we really just need to be smart and minimize our gatherings and minimize the sharing of air with others. A second area of concern is the downtown. We've had a lot of complaints that the outdoor dining activities in the downtown are responsible for a large increase in the number of cases. Not true. That's just not true. The meals downtown, the outdoor dining downtown started after the significant increase in July that the chief referred to. However, we need to ensure that the downtown doesn't become a significant source of infections, and that's why we're working very hard with the restaurants to make sure that the tables are spaced appropriately. And thanks to many members of our public who've alerted us when tables, for whatever accidental reason, are starting to get too close, or they're getting too close to the path of travel for people on the sidewalk. So it's important that just as individuals, we be smart in terms of going to gatherings and sharing air. It's important that we be smart in working with the downtown to ensure that the outdoor dining also minimizes the risk of contagion. And then the final of the 3 areas of primary concern are our wonderful agricultural employees and their families. And because of the nature of their work, because of the fact that most of the jobs in the agricultural industry are not high paid, and because of the cultural strengths of many of our agricultural employees, we see transmissions as a result of multi-generational families living together, which is a strength, but also an economic necessity. We see transmission as a result of people carpooling, which is great because it reduces traffic volumes, it reduces pollution in the air. It's another cultural strength, but unfortunately in this situation, it's increasing transmission. And then finally, we also see social events amongst our agricultural employees and their friends and relatives that really is back to number 1, that we have to minimize those kinds of gatherings, or at least if there is going to be a gathering, that we do it smart. So next slide, please. So all of us need to continually find ways to reduce our individual risks. And just as Chief Stornetta said, all of us have established certain habits. We've gotten in certain patterns of the way we act given the pandemic. And implicitly or explicitly, we act in that way because we've determined a level of risk we're willing to take. But as the number of infections increases in Paso Robles, if we take the same actions we took 2-3 months ago, that is exposing us and our loved ones to higher risks by that very nature. So we all need to, at this point, re-examine our actions, re-examine our assumptions, re-examine the risk level we're willing to take, and make sure, as the mayor has done such a great job in his posts on his website and in his videos, that the Recreation Department and Shauna Hauenstein and Angelica and others have done such a great job to help him produce and market. We need to wear our face coverings. We need to maintain social distance. We need to maintain really good hygiene practices, because it's not only protecting us, it's protecting the people that we love and our friends and colleagues. Next slide, please. So as we all know, the state and the county have taken the lead. They're the entities with public health officials. They've taken the lead in determining what the level of restrictions are in our communities, and the current restrictions they've put in place either are faulty or our observance of those restrictions are faulty. It's very difficult to know exactly which. So we need to, at appropriate points, think through as a community, what steps do we want to take to try to ensure that either we have additional restrictions or additional actions that will ensure our safety. And this is a tough one, because a lot of people in our community can rightly say, I don't know anybody who's gotten the virus. The infection rates are still pretty low when you think of the population as a whole, but it's still having a tremendous impact on our community. So we've listed here some of the areas we wanted to elicit some council discussion about. The first being information. As I indicated, Shauna, Heather Stevenson, and Halleck, others, especially the mayor, have done a wonderful job in getting information out to our community through as many channels as we can. In addition, the county has recognized that they need to step up their messaging campaign in both English and Spanish, and they're gearing that up now, and we'll start seeing the results of that in the next week or two. So information continues to need to be shared, but it's something we've done a good job of already. So we just need to maintain at that level and direct our efforts. Second is the whole area of what businesses do to assist us. And the police department has been responding to complaints. And so far there have been approximately 95 complaints against businesses in our communities, which I might note is much less than is the case in other communities in this county of our size. And I think that's a testament to the way our businesses have done their best to try to adhere to the regulations. And the police department's visits have been very productive in terms of sharing information. And what the police CSOs and others in the department have noticed is that, yes, our businesses are doing a good job, but we can always do better. We can do better as individuals. We can do better as a community. One of the steps we talked about before, and in fact, businesses now need to go through a self-certification process, was a signage program so that we could have standard signs that go up in the windows of businesses in our community, where it assures the public that they are doing everything appropriate to ensure the safety of their employees and their visitors. Just as a single business or a single employee doesn't want to be responsible for saying to a customer that comes in, well, where's your mask? Or you're not maintaining appropriate social distancing. Or when you cough, could you do it into your elbow? That's hard for a business to do when they're so hurting right now for revenues and customers. But if every business on a block did that, then it'd be much easier for all of the businesses to adhere together in ensuring good behavior. So clearly that's an area that it's worth consideration and working with our partners. And the mayor already announced that he's initiated with Stacy Jacobs and Gina and others in our community, and we'll be calling meetings to see how we can do consistent messaging from all of our organizations. Clearly, there are some people who aren't going to listen to government, what government tells them, but they may listen if Travel Paso is the one communicating the message, or Wine Country Alliance, or the Hispanic Business Association. Next is assistance, and I apologize for failing to introduce Paul Sloan at the beginning of the meeting when we all introduced ourselves, but he is, as you know, our new economic development manager, and he's taken the lead on the microgrant program that the council approved a meeting or two ago. And Paul indicates we've already had 122 applications on the English form and 4 applications on the Spanish form for assistance through the microgrant program. Some of those applications are for businesses that aren't eligible because they're not actually Paso businesses, but the vast majority are in fact Paso businesses. And the review panel will be chaired by the mayor, Henrietta Steros from the, who's the chair of the Chamber Board of Directors, Julie Robinson from the Community West Bank, and I believe Sarah Johnson Rios will round out the panel. And so we really want to applaud the people who've applied and ensure we get those microgrants out to assist businesses in their efforts to survive the pandemic. And then we need to be talking about assistance to individuals. Clearly, we have many, many families and individuals who are hurting. We need to consider such things as PPE kits, personal protective equipment kits that we can give. Some organizations have already started that. Maybe the city or the organizations that are leaders in our community can assist that. We can ensure that families that have had their primary members laid off have vouchers for food and gas and diapers and other essentials, because good health is important to warding off the virus. We can provide childcare assistance, and fortunately we have some childcare businesses that hopefully will be applying for the microgrants. We could work with the school district, provide tutors for school children. So there are lots of things that the city can either facilitate or help. We have a big issue of rental assistance and eviction prevention. As the council may know, the Judicial Council of the state just ended the eviction moratorium effective September 1st. So a lot of things that maybe the council want to talk about in terms of family assistance. In addition, we may want to talk about additional strategies for risk reduction and mitigation. Are there additional restrictions that we want to encourage the county to put in place, or even the city put in place? Are there incentives we want to offer or find a way of offering to businesses and to individuals that demonstrate best practices and assist our community in reducing their infections? Unfortunately, San Miguel and Paso Robles, as the graph that Chief Stornett showed, are well ahead of the rest of the areas in the county in terms of infection rates. So we certainly want to get our levels down to at least as low as the rest of the county. And finally, enforcement. And that's something that, as Councilmember Strong said earlier in the meeting, and Councilmember Hammond said, that our approach has always been to educate the public and have them take the appropriate measures themselves. But we've also always said if there were some businesses or individuals that were flagrant violators, it would be appropriate for enforcement. And so I don't want to be heavy-handed in that, but we need to make sure we're open to that if it's called for. So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, those are just some ideas and some thoughts we wanted to share with the council to help elicit a discussion and give you the opportunity to give us direction on any additional steps you want us to take or improve in terms of our efforts to minimize the scope of the pandemic and its costs in our community.
Very good. I'm sure we all have a lot to say about this. We do have some people online waiting to make public comments. So before we get to that, let's have any council questions we may have of staff. Councilman Strong.
I have no questions. I have comments later.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia.
No, sir, I'll wait.
Councilman Gregory.
I have two questions. John or Chief Starnetta, I noticed on the COVID count that the CMC is spiking our count. Is that true?
The CDC, California Department of Corrections, including the CMC, the numbers are not included in the count before you tonight. Those are only San Luis Obispo County numbers.
Okay. And then this is another staff question. There's a young lady that called in general comments today. Has anybody been in touch with her about assisting us in this issue?
No, sir, I was not aware of the great things she's doing. I really appreciated the mayor's suggestion to her that if she reaches out to him, he will ensure she's involved in the efforts he's initiating now.
We do have her in queue for public comment.
Oh, great.
Great. So I'll make other comments after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Hammond.
No questions at this time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to public comment now, and the first person on the list is the person who spoke earlier on this subject during general public comment, Yesenia Echevarria. Are you with us?
I am here. It's nice.
Welcome back.
To you guys. It's 9:15, and I commend all of you for your amazing work. So I am Yesenia Echevarria, founder of Mujeres de Éxito, Women of Success, and we've done a lot of grassroots education specifically for the Hispanic community. I also made a phone call to Red Flow since I had some concerns about information not being translated correctly. We also have a large indigenous population, believe it or not, in Paso and San Miguel in North County. And so we want to make sure that these folks who may not even speak Spanish or English are given the right information. And I will be completely transparent, and I'm not here to call anyone out or anything like that, but I think we need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to look at the numbers. And Paso Robles has been a hot spot from the get-go. I'm listening to what the gentleman was saying, that, well, it's not that alarming, and let's give people the right to go ahead and choose, and we don't want businesses to hurt. And, you know, my mother had a restaurant downtown, and I know what that lifestyle is about, and, I commend the restaurants now. And so, if we don't want to tackle it from a tourist perspective, then let's tackle it from a community-based perspective, and that is we've already given people the opportunity to decide for themselves, and it's not going in the right direction. When you have the Hispanic population being affected at close to 50%, that is a huge red flag. I appreciate the information that has been out there, but it feels to me, to be quite honest with you guys, that there isn't enough information being translated in Spanish. That's why we started this group. We are 531 members strong. We served about 350 families and gave out 80 hot meals, along with 100 groceries to local families. And so we've been doing a lot of the work, and we've been in the trenches seeing firsthand that some families are being completely infected. And when I say whole families, I'm saying mom, dad, and kids included. And so I don't know if it maybe we're just not aligned in seeing the reality of some of these families. And we need to do more connecting and bridging of resources and stuff like that. On our page, we went ahead and shared the information for the micro grants that the Paso City is giving to businesses and such. And so I'm very, very concerned. And so, like I said, I know the tourism is huge for our town, and I don't want to handicap anyone else who's already in an economical situation. But I think we can tackle it with families. What is alarming with me with COVID is that not only are we seeing COVID affecting families present now, but people's health conditions will be affected probably for the rest of their lives. So it's not just, okay, I got COVID, I'm going to stay in my house for 14 days. No, it's about tackling the issue of vulnerable families and folks who are financially being hit. They're afraid to speak up. I've been advocating for a lot of families. I've been getting a lot of phone calls saying, hey, Yesenia, there's been 2 positive COVID cases on my work site. What do? I don't want to lose my job if I speak up. And so, to be quite frank with you guys, safety conditions in some of these concerning as well. I made a few phone calls to ISO as well. I wasn't able to get really great information. So I hope that, you know, me being transparent with you guys, we can be a bridge and serve the families that are in dire need. I think we need to work with other agencies and not just, you know, leave it to the HBA. I've been looking at the HBA Facebook page, and I'm not seeing a lot of information, so that's concerning to me as well. And so I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to better serve our community. I'm the way I'm looking at these numbers as someone who loves Paso, seeing Paso be the red spot continuously week by week, number one place, does not make me proud. Does not make me happy.
That is 3 minutes. Would you like to? Could you summarize?
So basically, now moving forward, I would like to have an action plan to serve our local businesses, to focus on families, and also moving in a direction where we have a plan and action, where we do crack up down on families and people. I mean, this is not anything to take lightly, and I would like to take an approach to be more proactive and give information directly to those most affected, which is the Hispanic community and Indigenous community.
Very good. Thank you for your comments. Up next, we have Brad Dougherty. Brad, are you with us?
I am.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking my call. I am a local restaurant owner here in town. And questions I had was arising from the concern, not concerns, but I recently visited the community cooling center that we have set up at Centennial Gym, which I think is a fantastic facility. I think it's doing a lot of good things. But upon entering the facility, I see what looks to be like in-house dining. You know, people sitting at tables, no masks on. The tables are socially distant, which is great, but there are no masks on. And, you know, they're basically dining in an indoor operation. The question becomes, we're set up this temporary facility because of the extreme weathers. And now as restaurant, you know, we are not allowed to do in-house dining because of the COVID-19 orders set down by the governor. What I guess the question I'm asking at this point is there any possible way that we as local restaurants can get a temporary, you know, lift on these orders to where we can provide a safe environment for our customers to eat it as well? It almost seems fitting that if one place in this county can do it, or the city, then all should be allowed to do that.
Very good. We will try to get some answers for you. We appreciate it. Is there anyone else waiting to talk?
No, sir.
Okay, so we'll close public comment, bring it back to the council for council comments. I'm going to save mine until the last. We'll start with Councilman Strong.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm almost going to go back in my debate framework. We've heard all the real negative things about this.
So, Fred, I'm sorry to cut you off. Fred, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. It's my error. I wanted to answer the question before we went to council discussion. There was a question about in-house dining and the possibility of lifting regulations on in-house dining for local restaurants. That's my fault. I apologize.
Chief, would you like to take that one? Or you?
Yeah, either way. So it's not control that we have here locally. It's a state mandate. So we're unable to lift those restrictions. Additionally, if you were out at the cooling center and there were people dining in there with masks, there's a sign out front that clearly says masks are required at all times in the cooling center, and there is staff there. So I will look into that tomorrow to make sure that they are adhering to the mask requirements.
And I would just make an additional point, Mr. Mayor. There is no dining service. We are not serving food there, nor is anyone else. If an individual or several individuals brought food with them, we are not preventing them from eating that while they're there, because they may be there for a long time. but it is not food that's being provided by the city.
And if I understood the answer correctly, we don't have the authority to lift the restrictions on in-house dining for restaurants?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Fred, I do apologize for stepping on you. Back to you and your comments now.
No, Mr. Mayor, that's fine. That's not a problem. My concern is that this is addressing the COVID-19 cases. And as we address them, we are so focused on them that we may not look at the unintended consequences of how we address that. The unintended consequences are the isolation and the inability of people to have normal lives. And I understand our concern and how we're so concerned about this. But if I look at the statistics and if I listen to medical opinions that do not necessarily agree with the ones we're hearing about this, and I'm talking from doctors and nurses, from home care, from people who are concerned about the isolation and the depression. And maybe I'm going to take it back to a specific I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I chaired the meeting, the very last meeting that Supervisor Hill ever attended, which was just hours before his death. And the first thing I noticed then was his total depression, his total inability to even express himself in any way typical of how he had normally. And I even said to my wife that I'm not sure this man is going to make it. And then the next day when he was gone, it hit me, and it hit me very hard. It's also hit me very hard as I've talked to a number of people in my official responsibilities of talking to people in various things, of how many seniors who are so isolated and they're also alone that they have lost all their friends. They have lost every reason they have to live. They're either stopping taking their medications because they see no reason to go on living, or unfortunately, some are contemplating suicide. I do not want to see us isolate people to that extent that we have other deaths that are just as serious and more serious than what we're experiencing with COVID-19 because of how we address COVID-19. I want us to be very careful how we do this so that we don't become Big Brother again and go too far overboard. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing a lot, especially with the Hispanic community. I have no prejudice against any group of people. And I have a background, my ancestry includes Native American. It all includes another major minority group. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that I do notice that the groups that aren't wearing masks, that aren't taking the precautions, tend to be in certain of those groups that are very, very much affected and being infected now. And if people aren't educated, and I appreciate the young lady who spoke from the Hispanic organization, we do have to get this out in Hispanic. We have to get this out to the people who are being most affected and encourage them to take their temperatures, to isolate themselves if they get that temperature, to wear masks, to use disinfectant, to do the proper distancing. If we get those messages out and if we allow people to have some social contact as long as they observe those things, I think we can reduce many of the other deaths that are occurring that aren't being attributed specifically to COVID-19, but that are still serious within our community. And those are some of my serious concerns. I do want to see us do the education. I do not want to see us become Big Brother in this either. I think this is something individuals have to make that choice. And I would hope that they make the correct choices. But I don't think that we, as local government, should be the ones that start coming down on people and start regulating their lives to that extent. Then this is no longer the United States of America. And that is my concern. I do want to see this move forward. I do want to see us educate. I do not want to see us become overly restricted. Those are my concerns. And I think we have to start figuring out how to open this up reasonably without violating the state law. We can't go against the state. But I hope the state wakes up to these facts as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia?
Yes, thank you. I really do appreciate Yesenia coming on and talking about the different resources that she would like to see out there. But I do also want to talk about how much Angelica and the Parks and Rec have done for translating a lot of the county public announcements. And also, that they've been doing a lot on social media to try to get the county public announcements translated, and they've been putting them on the city website and on the Facebook page. There is also a magazine that is in Spanish, and I see it throughout the whole, it's called Somos Magazine, and that also educates the Hispanic community about face coverings and hygiene. So I know the information is out there. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm not for sure saying that not everybody's getting it, and I'm not saying that it's enough. We can all do more, and definitely educate more residents on the hygiene. I mean, I see it at the pharmacy every day, where we have to constantly remind people, about the importance of where we're at and what we need to do. But I also feel that everybody needs to maybe get together, and maybe we can invite Yesenia to some of our meetings that we have, where she can maybe be a part of what Travel Paso, when they have the stakeholder meetings, maybe she can come and we can all work together. I would like to see that for sure. But yeah, education is definitely needed. And I appreciate all the hard work that everybody here in the city is doing, and the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gregory?
Yes, I would like to mirror some of the comments Councilwoman Garcia was stating. So one of the issues, and Yesenia approached it very well, and is that a lot of the Hispanic community are afraid to lose their jobs because they might be sick, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to turn. And I think it's really imperative that we reach out. Here's Yesenia with 531 members in a group that's actively living with the COVID issues all the time. I think we should reach out to our staff and actually put her on our committees or whatever right away to get the word out and get her some assistance to these people who are having to make that decision is, do I tell my boss that I have COVID or not? This is a critical problem, and the education of this to everybody in the Hispanic community is critical. And I think our city needs to reach out to Yesenia and help her get assistance to those people that need it. And I'm sure Maria would be happy to help in that as well, and I would too. But I think that's one of the first steps we need to take. I agree with what Fred has to say about information. I think we all need to be vigilant in what our process is. I think a great amount of our community businesses downtown are abiding by the rules, but we could always do better. But most importantly, when we have people needing assistance that we're hearing about tonight on the air from Yesenia, I think we need to respond to that right away, and not even a stakeholder, but I mean right away. Get the information and the assistance to people who need it now, and encourage a response to her and interactivity with Yesenia. It's a tough battle getting through this, and we're working our way through it, but we need to reach out and get things going. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. again, through my observations, walking downtown, I rarely see anybody walking around without a mask anymore. I think our education has worked. Clearly, it's a world event, and everyone's become educated on really what this is. But of course, there are certain groups, that provide risk to others that are out there. And again, I don't think there's a lot to be able to do to comply. We live in a free society, but they also have to have personal responsibility. That's what it comes down to everybody. I think, Mr. Mayor, in the beginning, you said distance, disinfect, and diagnose. I mean, the 3 Ds are really what is going to keep people healthy here. Keep it away from groups that you don't know about, people that are unknown to you. Better just stay the distance. And disinfect all the time. And this is an issue that people don't quite understand sometimes, that if they are downtown, they touch a handle and then they touch their eyes later, you basically have an opportunity there to acquire the virus. And no one's really pushed the fact that, the eyes, nose, and mouth are 3 pathways to get this into our bodies. And of course, everybody's relying on this mask situation. And I've seen studies that it's more of a feel-good situation. I mean, it helps, but on the other hand, the eyes are totally wide open, and people are going to get it. I mean, I just had a friend that his family went through it. They were down for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and they're back to work. Of course, they were younger; they're under 40, but no residual effects. And again, certainly the elderly is the biggest at-risk group. We need to be extremely careful with them. And they also, I think, realize the fact that they need to, self-quarantine. They can't be getting out around people at this point. And they need to help others to help them bring things to them. So that's what we're doing with our relatives that are elderly. So again, people are getting, I think, educated to the point where we hope to see the end of the light of the tunnel coming. This vaccine is really the biggest hope that I see coming. But just like any vaccine, every flu shot we get every year doesn't always work. So this COVID bug is going to be around for quite a while. And people just need to understand it's a different world we live in now and take the certain precautions. So education, I think our city's done a great job. We've had plenty of locations that we've put out there to educate people as they come into town in both languages, Spanish and English. And I see that. I see a lot of people doing the right thing. Very few that I've noticed are not doing what they should. And again, those are the people that are just going to have to be that we live in a free society, and that's too bad for them. But I don't think I have anything further that I really want to push on this. I thank you for the report, though.
Thank you. I'm really happy when you folks are in favor of something before I even propose it. We are in a situation where we share very much the same values and the same ideas about strategies for helping our community. And as was said earlier this evening, sometimes folks don't trust government, but they trust each other. And I think one of the aspects of our community is that we've always had people step up to say, how can I help? In the last couple of weeks, I've had, as I'm sure all council members have had, many emails from people saying, we need more information, we need more assistance, we need to do more to blunt the spread of COVID in the community. Some people not so concerned about the infection, saying, hey, it just affects the old people, we don't have that many people, but others who are also very, very concerned that it will affect us dramatically. But the bottom line is, unless we get a handle on this infection, it's going to keep our economy clamped down. And I can't help but look at the numbers in the 93446 area code and think, if those numbers are only half as big, we'd be so much closer to being in compliance countywide that our businesses countywide could start reopening. So I think that's a real opportunity. I wrote back to one person asking for ideas on how we could enlist the community, not just the city and its staff, which has done a great job, but the community itself in getting involved in addressing this problem. And usually I don't read prepared things to you, but I did take the ideas of this person and try to put it into a form that we could use to form a citizens coalition to get information out about COVID and do a community effort, not just a city effort, but a community effort to address these needs. And I'm so glad that Ms. Echeverria has called up twice tonight, because I've never met the lady, but she said so many things that have been contained in the conversations that I have had recently. So this is what I want to share with you in the community. The COVID-19 crisis has affected the lives of every Paso Robles resident. Our zip code accounts for many more recorded infections than any other in San Luis Obispo County. The reasons for this are unclear, but the consequences are obvious. Until an effective countermeasure is developed, the virus likely will continue to spread through the Paso Robles population at a rate greater than other areas in our county. Efforts to keep the local economy afloat have resulted in a business community committed, for the most part, to adherence to infection control measures, hand washing, mask wearing, social distancing, and there is a system in place to address non-compliance. These efforts have kept some businesses open and some people employed. Efforts to address concerns by the general public have been less consistent and effective. There is still uncertainty about the transmission of the disease and how the community can work together to reduce that transmission. Therefore, it's proposed that a Citizens COVID-19 Coalition be formed to engage local residents in efforts to assess and satisfy community needs for information, direction, and assistance as they pertain to the coronavirus crisis. This will consist of citizen volunteers with liaisons from media, public health, safety, and government sectors. City of Paso Robles to be recognized as a model of citizen engagement in the fight against COVID-19. Not just the government, not just factions fighting this, but everybody together. The mission would be to create a community-driven effort to slow the spread of COVID-19 in the city of Paso Robles, and those programs would include things like a multimedia campaign to inform the community about infection control, a campaign to include bilingual radio, television, and print advertising, bilingual mailers and information sheets, bilingual internet social media campaigns, information booths at local farmers markets, library parking lots, etc. Also, businesses and individuals who are committed to being part of the coalition would be recognized for that. Businesses that are doing their best to keep things safe and keep things open should be recognized as positive influences in the community. And those people who are involved as a community in making this work would also be the people to walk and volunteer to businesses that maybe are not complying so well that for everyone's benefit they need to do that. So I've reached out to several people, including our school district superintendent, Kurt DeBost. I talked with Stacy Jacobs. She thinks that Travel Paso would happily be involved in this. I think our Chamber and Wine Country Alliance and Main Street would also sign on. I would call on our media to provide low-cost or no-cost public service announcements to carry this information bilingually so that we as a community can invest in the effort to fight COVID-19, not just because it keeps us infection-free, because relatively speaking, the infection rate is low, but it's also so we can meet the state mandates to reopen our businesses and return to life in a normal level as we have in the past. So I just wanted to inform the council I've been having those conversations with these people. I intend to move forward with folks like Ms. Echeverria and getting the community involved in fighting COVID-19 and not just separate agencies and separate organizations. And that's all I have to say about it. I think that I agree with everything that's been said by the other council members. We need to act now, and we need to encourage our community members to invest their time and energy and commitment into making that information effective community-wide. And I think we can blunt the infection rate in Paso Robles, both for our health concerns and also for our business concerns. Are there any other comments? Mr. Strong.
Mr. Mayor, I think what you have said is absolutely brilliant. And I think it captured very much the view of the rest of the council in many, many ways. And we need to move forward as a community, not as Big Brother trying to run people's lives, but together. And please recognize that people that are in the high-risk group, theoretically, actually are in the lower group in actual cases, because they are the one group that have the wisdom to realize that they do have to wear the masks, that they do have to socially distance, that they do have to take precautions against this disease. But those same people still need some kind of social contact, especially when they get to the situation where they have lost a partner, where they have lost family, where they have become isolated, and they have to have some community involvement. We have to figure out how to accommodate that safely and effectively. They may be the most theoretically at risk, but almost every single one of them that has gotten it and had some serious effects from it had other underlying things that contributed to that. It wasn't just COVID-19 that did them in. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward, please.
Very good. Councilwoman Garcia, any other thoughts?
No, sir. Just wanted to offer myself and any services and how, however I can help.
Excellent. Councilman Gregory.
Yeah, Mayor Martin, I appreciate everything you said, and I think you're correct. I would like to take it a step further, though. And one of the things that we assume as a society, that our Facebook and our social media gets to everybody. It doesn't. We need outreach into the community, and with Yesenia is a perfect example of a method to outreach into the Latino community, because it is not getting the word, obviously, and there's got to be ways to do it. So in your process or your proclamation or in our process of doing this, we need to include that outreach outside of the social media, because somehow we need to get the word out, get the education, and get the help to them so they can understand what's going on and how we want to assist them in fighting the COVID. And I like all the ideas, but I think we need to take it a step further in our outreach for that community. Otherwise, I agree with everything you said.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everything you said. Again, the education and the outreach, the suggestions you put forward, I think are clearly what I would agree to. And if we need to make a motion, certainly do that. Or if staff has the intent of the council, if that's enough, then I would say let's move forward to get more word out and further education.
So I'll ask Mr. Frucci, do you feel comfortable with the council's indication of its level of support?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're finished with this item unless there are further comments.
Nope.
Okay, I want to interject here before we move to our council comments. We do have an email from a citizen, Mr. Carr, who submitted written comments regarding the IWMA. We did not address his comments, his written comments, and I apologize for that. So I would ask please to have staff reach out to him and answer those specific questions. John, I think he had one for you too. So if you haven't seen his email, I'll make sure that you get it.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council business committee reports. Mr. Strong.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try to keep it brief. I chaired 6 regional meetings in this last period of time, resulting in an increase to Paso Robles of over $500,000 in our city's transportation infrastructure funding, plus another $134,472 for specific improvements at both of our middle schools for our Safe Routes to School program. Other approvals are providing $348.2 million in highway improvements in the North County at various locations, with most of it on Highway 46 East and Highway 101. For housing planning to meet the state-mandated regional housing needs allocations, known as RENA, I acquired over $100,000 for Paso Robles, with another $400,000 for regional collaboration on that effort. We've been pursuing many efforts in the city to do our required part in that regard, including the approval of the draft amendment to the housing element of our general plan as required by law. This will give the city and our community development department a little bit of money to offset some of those costs. And then I attended the library board of trustees meeting, at which time I requested that the staff reports be sent to me, and Helica very kindly not only sent them to me, but to the entire city council. So you have already received those reports on just how tremendously they're doing and how much support they're getting from the state and how much the community is depending upon them in order to relieve the pressures of our isolation because of COVID-19. And that's probably the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Garcia.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I attended the Housing Authority meeting and I spoke to them and about our housing element meeting, and they, on their report, they talked about their Oak Park housing, how it's everything is going well, and they still have a waiting list in all the phases. And also, I got the report from the library, and I've also been hearing a lot of great comments about the library helping out with book clubs and just keeping everybody able to pick up at curbside and just dealing with the whole staying at home, which really helps a lot, especially the senior community. I also just wanted to make a comment about immunizations. We do have the flu shot immunizations, the new ones for 2021 are in, and there's no appointments needed. And I also wanted to say we do have the high dose available. Just come by and we can administrate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gregory.
Yes, I would just like to follow up some commentary by Fred Strong. I think my comment is everybody who knows a senior citizen who is in a care facility should reach out to them and call them and talk to them. Fred Strong is absolutely correct that a lot of our senior citizens have been neglected unintentionally by the isolation and basically the total shutdown of any kind of activity or visitation from their family. So those of you that do have family or friends, please reach out to these folks and help them any way they can by communication. And they've been, I'll tell you myself, my mother has been in lockdown since March 16th, and she's all alone. And we have, a lot of us have senior friends and parents that are in that situation. And then on another note, I want to help in any way we can to reach out and help educate the entire community as a community for the city of Paso Robles. And I want to thank Yesenia for calling in and encourage her to please participate with us in every way she can, and we will reciprocate and help however we can. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hammond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week we had the IWMA meeting, which we had a full report on. We'll be bringing that further back to let you know what happens, and thank you for your authority to move forward on that. I'd like to also take a minute here, if you can, to acknowledge our Public Works Director, Mr. Dick McKinley. He's been with us for 5-6 years now, and he's going to be taking a job up in Washington. And I got to say, I really enjoyed working with him. He was a wealth of knowledge, got a lot of things done. I believe he'll be with us for another week or so, but this will be his last council meeting, so I'm not sure if he's still on. But again, really want to put a debt of gratitude out there for getting so much that was really needed for our city done through Public Works. Further, I'd like to also ask maybe our city manager, Mr. Tom Frucci, about maybe a report of some sort on the homeless with regard to Borky Flat. We have been hearing conversations, city versus Tascadero, that some of those folks are moving down there and impacting them. Tom, are you able to kind of give us a little update on what's happening with Borky Flat?
Sure, I believe Chief Lewis is ready to give that report tonight.
Hi there. Yes, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, at least from the police department's perspective on what's happening. So as council is aware, this evening you approved a contract for security through Miller Events. The site is up and running 7 days a week currently. I spoke with Sergeant Terry Afana earlier this evening to get an update. Seems like it's pretty consistently about 7 campers that are there. Of course, several of the folks that are staying there have various challenges, whether it's mental health issues, drug and alcohol challenges that we're trying to manage through. We see them manifest in some of behavioral issues that we're trying to manage. Paso Cares, along with other volunteers, are down there feeding regularly to make sure that there are folks that are staying have full bellies as they go into the evening. We have some showers. We have some restrooms, and of course, we're providing tents and sleeping bags to those that need it. Currently, we're restricting the access to the site to only Paso Robles members, community members, I should say. So it's a work in progress. Cleanup did begin today. We had a contractor on scene that was able to clean 2 camps up. My understanding is we're working from the Niblick Bridge north. Next week, they're hopeful that in a week's time, they'll be able to start at the 13th Street Bridge and move north from there as well. We kind of liken it to cleaning the Golden Gate Bridge or painting it. We're very confident that once we make our way up to the campsite that we're going to have to start again and do it. It's going to be a constant work in progress, keeping the riverbed clean and trying to encourage people to go to the campsite, and if they're not going to go to the campsite, to find a different place to stay. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Ty, a question from Hammond. The policy currently then is to not encourage other transients to come to Paso Robles, from what we're hearing. Our discussion with Tascadero is that because of our policies and our enforcement of the riverbed, many of them have left our area and come on down to Tascadero, which they're very concerned about. The reason we did Borky Flat was, again, to comply with the state mandate that we need to have some place for them to go. If we were going to remove them from the riverbed, we had to provide a place. I think we've done that. I think we've seen an increase in attendance out there, albeit, you build it and they still may not come. I think the goal, though, that was to get them out of the riverbed and stop the fires and life safety issues that we have from our other residents in town has been achieved. But again, I don't quite understand how we can assume that these folks there are our residents. In other words, we can't compel them to be there. And if Tascadero asks them to come back, there's nothing to say that we can't receive them either. Is that correct?
Well, I would say, Mr. Hammond, that I'm not quite sure, that there's anything more than anecdotal evidence that any of our folks are going to Tascadero more than they're coming here. Certainly, we're providing them a compelling reason, our local, homeless folks, to have a place. But at best, we only have about 7 people right now that are taking advantage of it. So there's still quite a few people that are choosing to camp in the river to try and avoid detection. I think a big part of this, which is, been a big part of the discussion for years now, is our ability to really enforce that. You might have heard that over the weekend we had 2 people that came through town with a pound of methamphetamine, guns, and different things, and the best we could give those people that were carrying heavy, drugs through our community is a ticket and release them. The situation isn't any better when it comes to our homeless folks. If we get somebody that doesn't want to comply, we can't put them in county jail. They're not going to hold them there. We might be able to give them a ticket if they're able to afford to pay it, and the city wants to incur the costs through the city attorney to pay for whatever it might be that's there. So from an enforcement standpoint, it's very similar to some of the other struggles that we're having when it comes to what are our options to really, we have a carrot and a stick. To really make this something that's, from an enforcement and police department standpoint, something that we're able to, really get behind. I think that that's the beauty of this particular project or initiative, is that it's been a multi-jurisdictional. We still do have mental health involved that are down there. We're trying to bring them services. We have our volunteer community down there, all trying to figure out a way to, make this the most effective, initiative that we can. And it's the first, it is a work in progress. But we certainly are struggling with trying to come up with a best practice or solution that works for our community. And I don't know that there's any evidence at all that our folks are going to Atascadero or vice versa.
Okay, well, thank you, Ty. Again, I compliment your department. It's been a huge effort to bring a little more policy into effect, and I do believe it is having some effects down there. Again, definitely a work in progress. It's a start. Thank you for your support.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Hammond.
Any other questions on this from council, Mr. Strong?
Well, yeah. Actually, on that particular thing, I'm
if I could just,
hello?
Well, if I could just suggest, this is Kimberly, if I could just suggest that there's one way to address this, if there's a lot of questions about this particular project, is it sounds like there's probably going to be interest to make sure it's on the next agenda so that we can address more in depth.
Okay, that makes sense. This is not an agendized item. Is it okay with the council if we agendize this for the next session?
Mr. Mayor, that's fine with me, but I do have some questions still.
Okay, Kimberly, how far can we go with the questions?
Well, I would not want to get into too many questions because we won't have the opportunity for the public to hear all of the questions necessarily. Right. So right. I would.
Well, my concern is public health and safety.
Yeah, it's still not agendized, so let's put it on the agenda for next time. We can raise all those issues.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I think maybe we should in the next month or two kind of touch on this to see the progress. So I think it's a good point from Kimberly that we need to agendize it and just get quick reports, every other meeting.
Yeah, I should have recognized that to begin with. Not an agendized item. Let's just make sure. Okay, let's just make sure it's on the agenda so we can efficiently and effectively discuss that. Anything else, John?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I've covered everyone else. My activities included attending Channel County's Board of Directors meetings. Looks like I'm going to wind up being first vice president of this organization. There's a possibility of that. I'll keep you apprised of that situation. I've joined stakeholders' calls here locally about local efforts regarding business and addressing COVID. There's weekly calls with our electeds, our mayors, and others with county public health to keep us up to date on COVID, and I sit in on those. I attended the Travel Paso Board of Directors meeting today. They are working to partner with the Wine Country Alliance and others to put together promotional materials, again, to highlight efforts to make sure that businesses are open and safe, both for our local people and for visitors. Councilman Hammond and I met with the Homeless Task Force and representatives from Atascadero this week. And a couple of things I wanted to talk about. First of all, Mr. Frucci, were you copied on the invitation to meet with Mr. Carbajal on the 20th?
Yes, sir. I have alerted Mr. Haas tonight that the meeting will be initiated at 9 a.m. at the Borky Flats homeless encampment, and I'm waiting for confirmation from him.
Very good. Just so the council knows, Mr. Carbajal's office contacted us and wanted to do an inspection of the riverbed and some of the actions down there, and I just want to make sure that the loose ends had been tied up there. Another issue that our city has been dealing with recently has been the issue of racial diversity. This is something that's affected cities across the country. And at the time we had a demonstration in our community, I expressed my desire to form a mayor's diversity panel. I have been working with a lot of people, including a cultural development task force that was initiated by the Paso Robles Unified School District. And I'm happy to say we've put together an advisory panel for me. This is a mayor's panel, so I'm not pulling anybody else into it at this point in time, of 13 really highly qualified advisors, local people, people from outside of the area to talk about that subject in this community. And backing them up, we have about 36 people who are ready, willing, and eager to work on committees and subcommittees on a variety of different projects to assess racism and also to address that in our community. So I'll keep you apprised of that as that activity continues. Do you have anything else for us, Mr. Frucci?
No, sir, not this evening.
Thank you. So upcoming events, we have Planning Commission meeting Tuesday, August 25th, 6:30 p.m. Airport Commission meeting Thursday, August 27th, 6:30 p.m. Library Board meeting Thursday, August 13th, 9 a.m. City Council regular meeting Tuesday, September 1st at 6:30 p.m. The deadline for submitting items for the regular meeting on Tuesday, September 1st is Wednesday, August the 19th. And in keeping with comments that have been made all evening long regarding the exemplary service and dedication of Mr. McKinley, I would like to add my congratulations on his advancement, my appreciation for his extremely expert advice and work, and the amazing effort he has put in to help us with water issues, with street issues, and so many other things, always keeping in mind that the needs of the public come first and always making that a criteria for his actions. So in that spirit, I would like to call for our adjournment tonight in honor of his service to the city of Paso Robles. I would entertain a motion.
So moved from Hammond.
Second, Gregory.
I have a motion by Councilman Hammond, second by Councilman Gregory. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? We are adjourned. Congratulations, Mr. McKinley. Thank you all for your hard work. Have a pleasant evening.